Okay. Hi, everyone. This is an interesting announcement that Seth and I have to make for you. If you've been listening to any of our episodes over the last 2-3 days, you may have noticed an addition at the beginning and ending of the episodes.
We sold out!
I was going to put it more charitably. We have finally made it in this capitalist system, and someone wants to use us to sell you products. Yeah, we got approached by the iHeart radio network, also known as Spreaker, and they invited us into their Prime program, and now we get to have ads in the podcast and make some money off of that, which you may know that we get money from Patreon. Obviously, you've all been, well, not all of you, but a lot of you have been supporting us for many, many years, off and on or consistently. And we very much appreciate that.
Absolutely.
Like your letters, your notes, your comments, all of that matters as much, if not more, than the Patreon. The Patreon has kept the hosting lights on, so to speak. You know how much of a difference it's made to us. However, it has not exactly been a living wage, shall we say. So when the opportunity came knocking from a network that I happened to be listening to podcasts from as a user, we couldn't say no. It was too perfect of an opportunity falling into our laps at a very appropriate moment.
Yeah, and we haven't been happy with Libsyn as our hosting company for a little while. Their background interface has really not made me happy. They've been making a lot of changes. It's become very difficult to work with them. So we have been looking for a new host, and they approached us, and I think this is the result of the Wheel of Time TV show. I don't know this for sure, but I think they've been approaching Wheel of Time podcasts and offering them deals.
I know for a fact that they approached Wheel Weaves with Danny and Brett about the same week that they approached us. So, yeah, I do think the show is influencing this, and that's very exciting. This also means we get promotion. So our audience might get bigger, which maybe increases the Patreon, certainly increases the ad revenue, and increases our reach, which, some of you have sent us some very heartfelt, nice letters. So just imagine that the statistical odds of us getting more of those is going up, and let that wash away the bitter taste of us selling out like the capitalist frauds that we are.
And the reality is ad hosting podcast is something that every podcast I listen to does. Everything from the tech podcasts to the news podcasts. There's a reason why they do it, and it's that it's very hard to put out consistent content for years without having ad revenue. And we've managed to do that, but it has been at the sacrifice of our own personal time and effort. And yeah, we're looking to hopefully just capitalize on that a little bit. So keep the skip button happy. Handy. Keep the skip button handy. Hopefully this doesn't turn you off too much and you can keep enjoying the content we're producing.
The content you know and love won't change. This will still always be a labor of love. But now it will be a labor of love that buys a little bit more coffee.
And beer.
And weed. And burgers. And okay, anyway. Thank you all so much for being our audience. We really appreciate you and hope that this works out.
Once again, I want to say a huge shout out to our Patreons. You guys have really kept us going. And in February and March, we've had 6 more patrons join the group. So once again, thank you so much for doing that. Starting from the bottom, we've got Steve Barnes.
Josh.
Seth Foster, love the name.
Morgoth 10.
Connie Dudden.
Dudden?
Let me say that again. Let me say Connie Dudden. Enunciate.
And Frank Rigdon. Thank you all so much for your support. We really appreciate it. It helps us continue on with feeling motivated to put this content out there when you show up and support us. So thank you all, new patrons and old patrons, for your support.
So we have a guest on today. I'll start actually doing the podcast. And your name is, we'll go with Chad, but your screen name is Egwene Fanboy?
Yes, Egwene Fanboy.
I guess we don't have to ask you your favorite character from the Wheel of Time.
Just instant plus. Anyone who's an Egwene fanboy is all right by us.
Well, thank you. No, however, I will say that after watching TV show, I have much more respect for Nynaeve than what it did. And on the read through definitely has helped with Nynaeve. But Egwene's my girl. Egwene's my girl.
Totally fair.
So, how did you find Wheel of Time in the first place?
Yep. So I started reading Wheel of Time in college. I think I'm probably just enough older than Seth where I was finishing college when he was finishing high school, but we started around the same time. I had a friend who told me to get into it. I started reading it. I loved fantasy. So I come from a very right-wing religious background. My father threw away The Hobbit 3 times before I was able to actually finish reading it. So I understand the need to invest in good fantasy literature. And my friend told me about this series by Robert Jordan, and I started reading it. And I'll be honest with you, I was a little afraid to even say Shaitan at first. I didn't want to name the Dark One. I was that naive. So I started reading it. Crown of Swords came out while I was reading it, so that was kind of cool. And I just kind of fell in love with the storyline. It was all interesting.
Yeah, it sounds like we're reading at the exact same time then, because that's exactly what happened to me. Yeah.
Yeah. And then my first big wait was having to wait for Path of Daggers. And, I definitely think that there's a host of reasons why this is all part of the slog. Also, I have a little bit of a theory, if I can say this.
Please.
One of the reasons why I think the slog is so hard to get through is because I feel like before that, Jordan was really good at setting up details and then delivering on them. And I feel like at Path of Daggers, we started getting some details that never will get followed up or fleshed out. And I feel like that there's a bit of like reader's debt or something that we kind of feel owed a little bit. I think it's one reason why it's kind of hard to get through some of these, in addition to everything else that you've mentioned already on the podcast.
Yeah, and I'll bring up an example in this chapter. Jack Massand is named as the leader of the dragon army, and this is the only time we get his name. This is the only information we ever get about him. There's never any payoff for that name. And that happens a lot. You're right. I wonder how much of that is Sanderson taking over and Jordan passing away, and how much he would have been able to capitalize on that. But at the same time, I think maybe he was just putting in too much, and there was no way to wrap it all up. And so
I think so too. I think I started thinking about that when I was listening to the last episode that you guys published, when you're talking about, because even here the names of the different like Storm Leader and stuff like that, and I thought about how the Black Tower never got fleshed out as a institution the way the White Tower did. And I think that would have been something that would have been very interesting. Honestly, I think Jordan probably could have turned this into a 20-book series had he lived, because he would have just kept writing it, because there was so much debt to pay off.
Well, we've talked about the Outrigger novels, having, Matt go into Seanchan and having a series of novels there, having a whole Black Tower series with Logain, having there's so many spin-off series that could have happened after the last battle.
Absolutely.
That we all got robbed of. Because Jordan was not old when he died. He had a nice beard that made him look old, but he was in his 50s. He's not that much older than you or me at this point. He still, had 20 more years of writing in him.
Right.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, and he was prolific, and he and Harriet had such a good team that it could have just been dynamic, so
I see a lot of setup that just never paid off, and that for a lot of reasons.
Yeah.
I see that you're saying that's part of why the slog exists even on rereads, right? The argument that it's only if you were wading through the books is only so true, right? Because if you're rereading it and it still feels like a slog, I think you're right. I think that's what it is you're coming up with all these details that don't matter, and you have no investment in caring when they come up yet again, on your umpteenth read.
Yeah, like the dragon army, guy that Seth mentioned, and it's it's why bother wasting my memory bank with a name I'm never going to hear again, so it makes it a little sluggish.
It's actually so you can win at trivia at Jordan Con.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll let Aradia handle that. Aradia is the trivia queen. So
me too.
I mean, that is true. No, I'll pass that off to Morgan.
Okay.
Oh.
But yes, that's the kind of question that I would go for trivia. That's the kind of question where everyone looks at me and goes, Aradia, that's too hard. And I'm like, no, it's a reasonably hard question. And then nobody even attempts an answer at it. And I was like, okay, it's too hard.
Don't feel bad.
Gathering Clouds, the title of chapter 22. In my ebook, the symbol is the Adom.
That's what it is in the paper book, too.
That's just because we're dealing with the Seanchan, and we do get a POV from the Seanchan here at the end.
That's what I assume. Yeah.
Which has a lot to do with Damani specifically and their issues.
Yeah, I was a little disappointed there wasn't actually more specific to Damani in this, with the chapter heading, but it's okay. You get some, you win some, you lose some with the chapter headings.
Well, Chad, do you want to read us in?
I would be honored to.
This is the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast.
Under a steady drizzle, Rand's small army formed columns across the low, folded hills, facing the Nemerillion peaks, dark and sharp against the western sky. There was no real need to face the direction you intended to travel, but it always felt askew to Rand otherwise. Despite the rain, rapidly thinning gray clouds let through startling bright sunshine, or maybe the day only seemed bright after all the recent gloom. 4 of the columns were headed by Bashir's Saldean, bandy-legged, unarmored men in short coats standing patiently beside their mounts beneath a small force of shining lances heads, the other 5 by blue-coated men with the dragon on their chests, commandeered by a short, stocky fellow named Jack Masson. When Masson moved, it was always with surprising quickness, but he was utterly still now. Feet planted astride and hands folded behind his back, his men were in place, and so were the defenders and the companions, grumpy about being behind infantry. It was the nobles and their folk, mainly, who milled about as if unsure where to go. Thick mud sucked at hooves and boots, and mired cart wheels shouted curses rose. It took time to line up nearly 6,000 soaked men, getting wetter by the minute, and that was not counting the supply carts and the remounts.
Very well done.
Nice work.
Thank you. That was, it's actually was much harder on the podcast than it is in the classroom of children.
Wow.
Yeah. The nice thing is we can edit some of the stumbles, and it always sounds flawless, or almost flawless. You should hear just how bad some of my reads are, and then I listen to how Rady edits them down. I'm like, wow, okay, not bad.
Dude, you sound like a genius.
Exactly. Shame you can't do that in front of a classroom full of kids.
Exactly. Well, I guess you can now with Zoom. You just have to delay everything.
So a couple of points I wanted to bring up. First of all, we're getting a lot of mechanics of power in this chapter, I noticed. Like, he does come back to, you don't have to face the way you intend to travel, but it feels natural. That's sort of a quote I use often when people are like, do you have to face the direction you're traveling? No.
I kind of highlighted that too, because to me, it kind of goes akin with the whole thing about Aes Sedai not needing to use their hands to weave the one power, but yet it's often how they learned. And to me, I feel like one thing I feel like Jordan makes a comment of saying throughout all these books, and it's almost a cautionary tale, is tradition is just as powerful as any other force that you deal with. And I think not so much that you need to like be a slave to tradition, but I think to not acknowledge its existence is where things can go awry, because you don't bring people along with you sometimes.
Yeah.
And he does do a good compare and contrast with Aes Sedai versus the Aiel versus the Sea Folk, and how tradition, they're all channelers, but the tradition changes how they channel quite a bit.
Right. And it's all lessons learned. And then what I love, again, I tell you, I would love to have seen, you talk about Outrigger novels, I'd love to have seen like a bunch of prequels where we learn about what, like we saw in the Glass Columns with the L, why are the Sea Folk who they are? You know, why are the Seanchan who they are? Like, I would love to see origin stories for all these things. How did the Borderlanders wind up being in the Borderland, their evolution to the kick-ass people they are. So, I love the idea of learning the different cultures and everything, like you said, Seth.
Yeah, the whole relationship of the Sea Folk to the Amayar, the way that the Aiel and the Tuatha'an interact, and like where the legends around the Cho'odon Call come from, and like why is the Age of Illusion a thing? And there's so much there. So much there.
Yeah, and I'm not a big fanfic person, so I don't want fanfics. I want answers. I want questions. I want discussion. I'd rather have meaningless discussion than someone's fanfic.
I know a lot of fanfic writers, but I don't read fanfic. I enjoy the way that they think and discuss topics. But yeah, I have no real desire to read the fic. I just like turning the ideas over endlessly.
And I see fanfic as a good way to practice your writing until you write your own novel, but I would never put out fanfic for people to read. Right.
I'm with you, Seth. I don't know if it's ego or just it's just not. Yeah, I'm not willing to do that. I'll keep my fanfic in my head.
Mm-hmm.
It is fun being a consultant on fanfic. I love being the kind of person who it's I'm just in the chat and they're like, hey, someone remind me how this mechanic works so I can write my fic better. And that's fun. I get these little peeks into their world, but yeah, I don't.
That's a good place to be. That's a good place to be.
It's
well, you're a Radiopedia, so
that's true.
You should charge for it.
Mm-hmm. And I feel like we definitely get an answer in this chapter for why Rand kept the carts and sent away the wagons.
The size of the gateway. Yeah.
Yes.
It's the size because he's not weaving the gateways, and so there's no way for the wagons to fit through, which is I think what we speculated before. But
yeah, we were confirmed to be right about that, which is nice.
Yes.
Right. I remember when you guys first had that hypothesis. So one thing I wanted to ask, and I didn't. I mean, and feel free to I don't want to step in or say too much, but one thing kind of stood out to me in that first was I never realized they were blue coated. And I never have seen or heard blue associated with Rand or with the dragon. And so it just kind of stood out to me. I didn't know if you guys had any, have you seen anything with blue in the dragon? It's always been red or black. And so I thought the blue kind of stood out a little bit.
Yeah.
I feel like it's the Saldeans that they wear blue. It's Bashir is very associated with blue. And so I think it's, yeah, and then because this is Matt and Bashir's army, that these are the rejects from the Black Tower that have been trained up. And so I also feel like he's using the whole English army who had the side button coat and a lion on their thing, but he's just replacing it with the dragon.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay. I didn't think about it like that. That's good. It's a good imagery.
But that's what it is. It's that blue coat button up the side with a giant dragon on the front of it.
Gotcha. So when you open up it at the top, the lapels fall apart. They put a splash of color over the top of the dragon.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
And
okay.
Those side button jackets were pretty common, I want to say, in the Civil War, but just in a lot of wars where you want your heraldry on the front. And I would have to go back and look at the uniforms. I'm not familiar with them enough to.
That's an interesting question. I had not really thought about where the blue color came from, and yeah, I think I agree that it's got to be. Well, we're for the dragon, but we're being trained by Saldeans. Blue fabric is how Saldeans dress, so we'll dragonify ourselves with the blue fabric that's chilling out. That seems simple. Mm-hmm. It's an Occam's razor solution, at least. Yeah.
Exactly. Or you know what? It could have been. That's what it's like when Rand bought the red wrapping in Andor back in book 1. It was cheapest.
It's
cheaper.
An economics decision.
It's like when the Russians astronauts went up to the space station in gold and blue, and they're like, "Hey, we just had a lot of gold, yellow fabric lying around. I don't know.
What's just a coincidence?
Coincidence? Nothing. Ukraine? What? No, I don't know what you're talking about."
Yeah.
So Rand is in full regalia. He's polished his belt. He's got, all of his jewels on, and he's actually for once regretting the lack of jewels on the hilt, which we actually just saw Avienda use to buy cloaks.
Yes, I noticed that.
Yep. That whole thing with the kin and how they're trying to get to Andor, and Avi just has these gems, and Rand is casually thinking, be cool if I had those to look awesome. Meanwhile, she's literally buying clothes with them. Thank you for giving them away, Rand, actually.
Right. let me stimulate the economy with them.
But it also tells me where Rand's headspace is. He went from a guy who would oh, this sword's beautiful, fuck these gems, they're gaudy and stupid, to understanding the power of being ostentatiously wealthy.
Yes. Well, it's I think in the last episode, I think that I listened to, you talked about how he is not just transitioning to the emperor god kind of thing. But it's he's even going above emperor, and so he needs all those trappings. Like one of the things I love about Roman history, is when Diocletian came into power and just set up, the tetrarchy, and how he basically decided Rome could not survive being as in touch with the people it governs as it did. You have to remove. So he invented all these customs, traditions, and layers that kind of put a buffer between all the people. So all of a sudden the emperor went from being princeps to, dominus, being God. And I feel like that's kind of what Rand is kind of experiencing here with, like you said, with these gems. He's understanding you got to have some of those trappings. You got to have some of that separateness, because what you're doing is too big for in any one, person, being, or whatever else. You've got to have all that trappings to create this, the system that you're creating.
Yeah, I dig that. That makes a lot of sense, because nodding. Brown Aja nodding.
Oh, good. I'm glad you like that. Good.
Well, and I like your point with Romans, especially like the transition of Rand into this emperor. I mean, when have we really seen that in history? Well, the Roman Empire. That's there's a lot in common.
Exactly.
Arthur Hawkwing
and the Romans spent however long, 400 years or however many years, trying to deny that the emperor he was just first among equals. He wasn't really an emperor, and they kept just having trouble and everything else. So then Diocletian comes along. He's like, "Look, we're emperors. We're almost gods. We're going to do things a little differently."
So what you're saying is they were saying he was a chief among chiefs?
Yes, that's what they were saying. I believe they were saying chief among chiefs, and he's like, "This is great for the Aiel, but for the rest of these bastards, I got to knock some heads around."
Oh, one of the things I'm listening. My girlfriend is listening through A Shadow Rising. There's a point after they come back from Ruidian where Rand is in a bad head place, and Matt is so fucking loyal to him in those couple of chapters. I just had to bring that up because people are like, oh, Matt abandons Rand all the time. And I just had to be like, no, there's a point where Matt is absolutely ride or die for Rand. After he finds out he can channel, he comes back and totally redeems himself. Completely irrelevant point, but I just wanted to bring that up.
No, I totally think you're right. I think in many ways, Matt never expressed it the way I think it would have satisfied so many readers, or even maybe would have been more helpful. But I feel like Matt was right up there with Nynaeve at being 100% loyal to Rand the entire time. Even more than Egwene, and in some ways probably a little bit more than Perrin. He's probably a little closer to Rand. But I definitely agree with you. I think Matt was very good for Rand's mental headspace during that time.
Yeah. Yeah, he had a dark moment that he never apologized for, and a lot of people don't want to forgive him for that. But he does come around in the long run and do a lot of very supportive, intense things that Rand needs desperately. Because Shadow Rising is that's a rough book.
It's a very rough book.
Yeah,
it's a very rough book.
But there's like 3 days after Rand comes back where he's waiting for Aviendha and Moraine to come out, and he's sitting on the rock, and Matt is right by his side for days. Right
by his side.
Yep. Yeah, we don't really see that. It goes by in like a paragraph. But
well, and I think it's funny you mentioned that, and again, feel free to cut this out, but just my own personal, mental health that I've been dealing with and everything. Like my business partner is very much a Matt kind of person, and not effusive, whatever else. But when you get someone who can just sit next to you and just help you process what you're going through, that can sometimes be a priceless gift. Even if it's not, effusive or therapeutic or whatever else, sometimes it's nice just to have the solidity of that relationship there.
Even if they're just on a podcast in your ear.
Same with that true.
Absolutely.
Same true. You guys are there with me too. Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Sure.
But I noticed we have the scepter here because Rand, I love the fact that Rand, with the look of the power, polishes the scepter to mirror brightness. But when does the scepter go away? I feel like we don't see it a whole lot as part of his accoutrement after this.
It gets blown up when Semirog takes his hand off.
That late?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because he's holding the scepter, and that's the hand
that
he blocks
okay.
with. So it goes away in a ball of fire.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for that. Because I was wondering, I didn't remember what happened to it. And I was like, does it kind of just get dropped off somewhere? So, okay.
That's a Radiopedia. That's right there.
Well, and it's also some of the cover art it's one of the ebook cover art pictures is him pushing Min behind him and getting his hand blasted off. And I remember he's holding the thing in it, because unlike Darrell K. Sweet, the people who did the ebook covers actually understood the content that they were depicting. I love the Sweet covers, but clearly he was not as connected to the content.
No.
I wish we could get a series of books with the ebook, hard books with the ebook covers. I think they're just beautiful.
Oh God, that'd be awesome. I would put up money for that.
They're so good. And for
I'm nodding.
Yeah, I would too. I think awesome collector's edition, raise money for, whatever charity Harriet wants. And I think the suckers would be amazing.
Absolutely. But yeah, Rand is taking his army to Altara. So that's why he's in his parade vest. That's why he's shined up and wanting his jewels and all of that, is because he is leading his army to start the campaign in Altara against the Seanchan. It's a big moment.
Yes.
A huge moment.
A huge moment. This is, because I remember even reading the book for the first time and thinking, okay, we've made it through Tear and Carrion. We got the L behind us. Ilion was no way. We're going to conquer the Seanchan, get them underway, and then we're going to move on to Tarmangaiden. No idea what was about to happen.
There's a lot happening. And so how many books are we going to pack these points into? What? How?
Right. I even wrote at the end of one of the paragraphs, he's here to let men know who he was, let the Seanchan know who had come to destroy them. And I wrote in the side margin, RJ set us up, because I think we were totally prepared for another victory, another amazing experience of Rand getting his shit together and just, wiping him out. And well, we'll find out how dreary it gets.
It's not what happened. So next paragraph, we get a little bit about the fact that everyone has to be strong enough to make a gateway. That's why they're there. Well, he has the Ashaman. And also we see that he is hiding the dizziness. He's seized the power in his tent and just trying to avoid anyone seeing the weakness, which again, we've concluded is from the crossing of the streams.
Right. Which, great theory. That made so much more sense on this. And I had never thought about that till this podcast. I think you 100% captured it.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. And he's holding on to the power as much as he can now, too, which is something that we see in Avienda's vision, is something one of his children will potentially do, is just hold it all the time. But he's kind of marinating in the taint a lot more and subjecting himself to the doubling and the linking with Moradin more and just wearing himself out, because we know that even holding the power is it's physical labor to do that. So he's even more tired than he already was going to be.
Right.
And the one thing I think people miss with this is how much taint is getting into his soul. When people are like, oh, well, he's not insane. No, he's completely insane. And he's going more insane every day. Like that whole creeping madness that exists over his entire brain currently is in his brain and getting bigger. And that's the LTT presence in his brain.
Absolutely. And I was going to say, going back to one of your first analogies, or you and Patrick way back in the day, when you likened the power to drug use. And so even just using untainted power is corruptible or corrupting and everything else, and that can do damage on you. So for him to be choosing to hold that more along with everything else, I think you're spot on. And it's amazing too how when you read it again, like I'm sure everyone said, I used to be one of the ones that argued, Rand's not insane. It's just the crazy voices in his head. I was totally that guy. But it's so hard to deny that when you reread it and actually get into each chapter and look at it. And then on top of it, you understand what RJ was doing. So, but yeah, I think the whole drug analogy is great for that, because he's holding it more, which is just causing everything that's wrong about it to be even magnified.
Yeah, I'm not sure if he says the taint is particularly bad in this area. I'm wondering,
is it bad today? Like it comes and goes like the weather.
Yeah.
Which is like, he's never described it like that before. And the Dark One feels like he's in a sort of timeless, eternal place. I feel like this is more, Rand is his defenses are extra low. He's in an extra rough spot. Like this is more of a reflection of Rand than of the taint.
I think it's a great observation, Aradia, because I think that, and also I think it allows us to kind of see that Rand is allowing his inner issues to affect his reality.
Right.
Because he's blaming it on the place. He's saying, oh, it's the location that the taint's worse, but it's him. And, as Buddha says, wherever you go, there you are. And so he's bringing that to him, but he's allowing it to affect his outward reality.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, agreed. The next thing I have is him thinking about having Kalendor, and every time he reminds himself that he has it, something wriggled across the outside of the void. Anticipation with maybe a touch of fear, and maybe a touch of fear. That's because he thinks he's going to use it for the cleansing, right? That's really, I think, what he's anticipating. I don't know that he's planning on using it in this battle. He's expecting the Ashaman to handle this battle, and then it doesn't go that way, and he changes his mind and uses Kalendor, and he shouldn't have. But at this point, I think it's anticipating the cleansing.
There's that moment where he says the 50-odd Ashaman were as big as hammers anyone could wish for. Rand wondered what they would have said if they told him he was a hammer big enough by himself. He had considered doing this by himself. It might come to that yet. And I think that's where he's thinking about using Kalendor to just do it himself. Yeah. So it's not his first plan, but it's plan B.
Right. Yeah. Well, and I think Rand's whole transition to Emperor is part of realizing that no matter how much everyone else may do something, that there is always going to be not only an expectation that he may have to do it, but also the understanding that he's powerful enough to do it. Because, I mean, imagine the scene of Rand coming down with Kalendor and just wiping out the Seanchan, that's just by itself.
Yeah.
I did have to comment on he wished Semirog would come for him now, right that instant. He would make her weep. Like, no, but Codswain might.
I know, I was thinking about that. Yeah, I love the whole, the old folksy saying of when rain fell in sunshine, the Dark One is beating Semirog. I've never heard that before. I'm assuming it's a Southern thing. Is this a Southern thing?
It's very much so. I actually wrote it down. I grew up. My family is all from rural South Georgia, so really like out in the sticks. And I heard that like my whole life that when it was raining, when the sun was out, the devil was beating his wife. Was what we always said.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I wrote that down. I was like, I got to make sure I tell them that I actually grew up with a saying like this. So I know exactly where RJ got it from. It's definitely a play on that.
All right, nice, cool. Yeah, it felt like it had to be some old timey thing from like the real world, but I'm a Pacific Northwest millennial. I have no idea.
Yeah, my grandmother and grandfather used to say it, and it's that, especially when it was like, in the South it gets very humid. So after a rainstorm, you get that little bit of rain. It's still raining, but the sun's out, so it's really humid and steamy and sticky. And so it's like it evokes all of that. So when the devil's beating his wife, it's that smuggy, hot, wet, bright, shiny kind of feeling. So. It's it definitely evokes something in me growing up listening to that when I read this.
Nice. But yeah, it's funny that Semirog will come for Rand and will make him not weep, but it will be the last that can be done to him. And then Codswain will be the only one who ever successfully makes Semirog back down in any way, shape, or form.
And I love, again, here's Lewis Theron on point. Nothing makes Semirog weep. She gives her tears to others, but she has none herself. Yep. That's just fact, right?
Yes. Well, and Semirog is such a badass. I mean, I think Semirog she may be one of my favorite Forsaken just because she was so hyped up and so scary and even so effective for so long. I was kind of sad at the way she kind of went out, but I think Semirog she was genius writing, at least in the build up of creating her character and everything. So and even like little drops like that, I think are so helpful for that.
Also, I noticed the more sane Lewis Theron seems, the more insane Rand seems.
Oh yeah. Well, I wonder if that was some sort of like, is that a dichotomy that RJ experienced, like through war or whatever, or dealing with madness or whatever? Because I know he's like really trying to write madness, and I wonder if that's like some sort of dichotomy that he had seen or experienced or whatever.
Yeah, it would make sense, though. I mean, if you're using the voice as a coping mechanism and you yourself are coping differently, the voice will respond to that.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
I always feel it's a bit of a balance, right? The more insane Rand gets, the less insane LTT gets.
It's a conservation of sanity.
Yeah, exactly. Totally.
Yeah. Well, actually, you know what, already? I think you're exactly right, because I think it's almost the mind itself has to know, it has to maintain some sanity somewhere. And if Rand is having an insane reality, it's got to turn that its own sanity for its own survival somewhere. And I think it was channeling it through, Lewis Theron. So I think that's a great observation, Seth. I appreciate you bringing that up.
Yeah.
That opened my mind a lot. I love that. That was great.
There's a little bit about the size of the army, the fact that 6,000 used to be huge, now it's tiny.
Now literally hundreds of thousands. Like that escalated so quickly. So quickly.
Yeah.
So fast.
So about Torian's still a drunk.
Yes.
The shocking nobles are still assholes.
Yeah, I love the one place they said they were upset because they had to walk behind the infantry, and I think it's one thing Rand never quite understood about nobles and everything is just how petty they actually could be.
Yeah. I wanted to ask, what's up with Wyraman being particularly upset about being put on the right flank? Is that him being a noble who's a douchebag, or is it like some sort of dark friendy being on the right flank sucks because I know the strategy that's coming kind of thing?
I almost think it's embarrassment for not being at the front.
It's just the nobleman in him. It's not the dark friend.
I can't find anything else that's like,
Okay.
I mean, I think he's pissed that he has no idea what the plans are that's coming and he can't inform anybody about it. And there's no advantage happening. The only thing that maybe I was thinking is it has to do with the assassination attempt later, that maybe he had something to do with that, but I can't make a connection.
What I kind of thought was, and I don't know enough about this, so this is pure speculation. I thought it had something more to do with like battle strategy, and maybe like the right flank was going to be doing something either more dangerous or not as glory hound or whatever. So I didn't know. I don't know enough about battle strategy to know if right flank versus left flank, actually would have mattered or whatever. So
I think it's just not leading the charge.
Yeah.
It's like being a left outfielder, right? Like,
yeah. Okay.
say, Wyraman wanted to pitch and Rand put him out in the outfield. So I think that's really what's going on here.
I guess it just amazes me that Wyraman would even at this point still think he could pitch. Like, it's like you haven't learned any lesson yet. You still think that Rand's going to put you out front. Like,
is Wyraman an idiot or a dark friend? Turns out he's both, right?
Right.
Yeah.
You can't really separate those two,
That is more likely.
Yeah.
I want to be close to the middle of the action because that's where the action is, and that's my purpose in life, which is why I joined up with the dark side in the first place. So,
right.
Yeah. All right, yeah.
Absolutely.
And then we get to talk about the two high ladies that kind of show up repeatedly throughout the
two
campaign,
ladies,
which is Ailil and Anayela, which are a Tyran and a Kyrianan?
And she is a Riotan.
Yes. Sister.
Torum Riotan,
Okay.
yes.
Torum
And
Riotan.
she actually goes on to be a fairly successful supporter of Rand's.
Right, she's practical.
She's practical, as opposed to Anayela, who continues to try and undermine him and rebel and ends up paying for it.
Right.
She goes up against Elaine.
Oh, is that where Anayela ends up?
Yes.
Oh.
Yes.
Yep. And Elaine takes her out pretty hardcore.
Why would you go up against Elaine? She's not Andoran.
Because when Elaine was trying to secure Kyrie in, I believe, right?
Oh, right, because she has a Kyrian campaign too, right?
Yep.
Ugh, I lose so much track of what happens in Elaine's plot.
Yeah.
Like,
Especially with the nobles.
Yeah. Well, I knew she gets kidnapped like a million times. And
right? Which time are we talking about?
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So yeah, these two show up repeatedly throughout this campaign. They kind of are stand-ins for most of the nobles at large. Like, hey, let's have some like annoying political women up front at the head of the name salad cluster.
Yeah.
Also, Anayela, Dark Friend alert.
Oh, she's a dark friend.
Really?
After returning from Dragonmount,
I didn't get
Rand
that.
confronts the High Lords and Ladies of Tyr. Anayela and Waramon are exposed as Dark Friends when they cannot look at him.
Oh, wow. I did too. I forgot that.
Catch.
That's from Encyclopedia Watch.
Good catch, Seth. Well, it's a good thing she's the least effective one then.
Yeah. Yeah, she is very ineffective. Okay, so that's part of why she continues to simper. That's part of why she never gets on board. That's part of why she's a thorn in the foot for all of our heroes, is because she's actually a dark friend.
Well, and can we say something about dark friends here for just a second? I would love this happen because I feel like the Dark One made such a huge mistake by making selfishness his primary virtue. You know, I mean, he attracts the wrong people every time. They never can pull together. They never can organize. And they're always simpering about whatever their own focus is. You know, I think that's a huge problem with Dark Friend. They need to go to like a retreat and get some real core values out there, you know, develop a better vision for what it means to be a Dark Friend. You know, get some corporate training.
I don't think it's like the dark friend or the dark one wasn't like, oh, I need these people to be selfish. I think it's like that's the best way to get people on it.
Well, I would agree
Yeah.
from my several months of studying like alt-right and fascist history. Like they are all messy, petty bitches throughout history. Like,
Okay. We have to talk offline. I didn't know you had done this. We have to, I can't wait to talk more about that. That's a very fascinating topic.
but it's a recurring theme. So it's not like RJ made that up for the Dark Friends. Like the Dark Friends in the real world are petty bitches.
Yes.
And they're so fucking ineffective. They keep undermining each other.
And in fact, we probably are lucky that they are, because that's what has kept them from, can I be political on here?
Go for it.
Yes.
Okay, I think that's the number one reason why Trump did not have a second administration.
Totally.
And that's what scares me is like, I don't want a competent fascist to come into power.
It's bad when that happens.
That's a problem.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. DeSantis.
I did listen to a very interesting podcast that was going into one of the ways that you can actually make people do evil is convince them that they're doing good.
Sure.
Yes.
And so sort of as an alternative. And I don't feel like Jordan really explores that very well. There aren't very many people with good intentions who do bad things because they don't understand what's going on. Most people who are good do good things. And I think that one thing he could have done is have
Almost like a reverse Varen.
Exactly. But like having maybe like the Black Tower, it would be really interesting to have a bunch of Ashaman who really want to do good following Taim because they think he's the leader.
Yes.
You know, and he doesn't. He has them actually be evil or be converted.
He has a good factor of people who don't know any better and are doing their best and make the wrong decisions, or people who are fundamentally good but like don't understand the context of their decisions. He plays with that. But you're right. These are separate ways that good people do or don't participate. That's too bad he didn't play with that.
Absolutely. Well, and also, I mean, again, putting things in time perspective, as someone, I say this all the time, I've lived too long because I'm 48 now. So I've lived through like all this iteration as an adult of, you know, the movement of the parties and everything. And a lot of what we see now as out and out fascism, regardless of where it's coming from, was just not seen out and out. And so it may be something he was just not as aware of as we are. And so it may not have been part of his like zeitgeist, which is why he didn't really explore it.
Yeah. How dare he not cover literally everything in all these books? God.
Right. Well, and especially, you know, because it's so interesting because even, again, you know, I know that Patrick and Seth said this way back in the beginning, you know, like there are people that read the Bible over and over again. This is like 14 Bibles, but you can still get so much from this, so much wisdom. And again, you know, I know we were talking political. I don't want to be political. I don't want to talk political because I feel like there's enough here, and there's enough problems with both sides, whatever, I'm sure. But I feel like that you can get a lot of practical advice from Jordan's books that help you to navigate whatever the issue is and whatever the point of view is. And it's really just like how to be practical in a world that's going crazy around you.
So much nodding.
If we have not needed that during this pandemic, I don't know what we have, which I think is why so many people have gotten retuned into the books. You know, how do you navigate the insane?
Yeah. Yeah. The pandemic and the show really did good things for the book's popularity together.
Absolutely. And this podcast. This podcast has done good things.
I like to think so.
I try not to think that. Too much pressure.
Well, you don't have to. You're humble. That's great. I'll think it for you. I'll be your fan.
Okay, back to the chapter. So there's the comment that I think is most important is these two women are very much pointing out that Rand has an affinity and a care for not hurting women. And that freaks Rand out because for the first time he realizes people know that and can use it against him.
To which I am like, dude, this has been a central plank of your entire identity for books. You really think people didn't notice?
But see, here's what I'll say and I don't know, Seth, you feel free to weigh in. I actually highlighted that in my book. And I think, as someone, again, who has lived too long, millennials are much more self-aware than any other generation has ever been. As a Gen Xer, I've had to learn to become a lot more self-aware, but I think this is very common among people, especially in the generations that Jordan was writing for. So I definitely can see where Rand was not aware at all of how he was coming across. And I wrote it down. I was like, how many people knew? I think it actually took him by shock, because you think that you're covering it up. You think that you're, making the best of it, and you're doing it for a noble purpose. You don't think you're creating a weakness that's going to be exposed. And I think RJ was really good about that.
Interesting. I'm notating my book with thoughts for later.
Oh, okay. And Seth, like I said, please feel free, because I don't want to make this too much, my experience. But I mean, you're kind of in between Aradia and I's age, so
Yeah. Well, and one thing I've talked to Aradia about, and this is private, but was a little more private, but pre-college, when I was 18, I wasn't the best person. And I had to come through a real journey, probably in college and even post-college, and sort of acquire that self-awareness that you ascribe to millennials. It was something I had to work on. It was something I had to acquire. And it wasn't necessarily that I had evil opinions or bad opinions, but, but absolutely. Like I had things that I had never considered, and I just did the default because that's the way society was in the world I was living in. And it was only after college that I actually did that self-examination. And I think when you say millennials are the most self-aware, I think what happens is they've had to do that self-examination at a much younger age.
Very well said. I would completely concur with that. It is probably, like most things, a blessing and a curse. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that's very well said, Seth.
What crippling anxiety about how people see you at all moments of all times in all contexts isn't healthy? What? That seems perfectly ordinary to me and all my peers.
And I think not really being exposed on the internet meant you could be kind of a shitty person and no one would call you out on it.
Right.
Because and now millennials, they live their lives online, and you do something shitty, someone's going to come down on you hard.
Oh, yeah.
I am just old enough that the vast majority of my digital footprint comes roughly around when I started to get really self-awareness plus adulthood. I'm just old enough that MySpace doesn't really exist anymore. So all of that is gone. I can't see my MySpace anymore. So, yeah, it's living online, living in that recursive loop, right? Of being under a microscope and on stage all at the same time the older I get, the less I want to be online and the less I want to put myself online. And the more I see it going badly for people, and the more I'm just like, this is not worth it. But yeah, it does make you think about how you're going to be presented. And then I don't know about my other millennials, but I definitely was raised with some really neurotic, self-aware people who.
Well, and what I'll say to you, Aradia, is I'll also say, and anyone else there, is that if dealing with it younger, becoming more self-aware younger, all it means is that you get to move through your anxiety to a healthier place sooner than most people. So it does get better. Into that, yeah. It does get better.
I'm in therapy.
It does get better.
And one thing I'll say, and I'll get meta about this, one of the reasons I really like putting myself out there in a podcast format as opposed to Twitter or Facebook or MySpace is that if you're going to listen to my podcast, you're going to sit down and listen to me talk for 2 hours, and you're going to get some of the nuance and subtlety and understand who I am and where I'm coming from, which does not happen in 140 characters on Twitter.
Yeah, long form communication.
100%. Mm-hmm. I feel like that's one of the worst things that both sides, and I hate to do both sides because I don't think both sides are the same, just so you know, but I do think that both sides choose to ignore nuance. And I feel like that's one thing, getting back to the chapter, let me try and do this for you, Seth, I'm sorry, is that Robert Jordan does really good at allowing us to see nuance and understand the importance of nuance in interactions and communication. And so even here, just the very fact, Rand's like, how did they know they had heard, which means other people knew, and then how many people knew, that's how he ends the question is, and so it changes the nuance of his interactions from here on out.
And when I hear Jordan talking about these books and his conception of the books, one of his central tenets is information takes time to travel, and people necessarily have different point of views because they have different information. And like it's the rumors fade to myth thing, but it's also where his great POV writing comes from, because he has to sit down and show you that this person has different information and therefore has a different opinion.
Yeah. Yes. Nodding. I'm nodding.
For sure. And the way that you communicate information in the game of telephone is colored by how you hear it and by who you're delivering it to. And so it's not like there's just a one-to-one context as you're going down. This was something that fascinated me when I learned ASL. I had to take 2 terms of ASL, American Sign Language, in college because I finished high school without getting the right amount of foreign language. And so ASL counts as a foreign language. And it was fascinating to me how much the signs themselves, you put a lot of interpretation on them, and you end up giving other people a voice that they may not see for themselves. Like the way that you contract words, right? Like that's a very personal choice. You say don't or do not. And you as the receiver are the one making a lot of those choices in ASL because of the way that the signs work. That signs, I can't think of a good explanation or a good example, but it was a fascinating thing to me that someone who's very articulate and precise and posh is going to hear everyone as articulate and precise and posh. And someone who's like a redneck that makes a slurring contraction out of everything is going to hear everyone else. And I say hear as an analogy, obviously, but kind of the same deal in terms of information here.
Absolutely. I've got a friend who has a doctorate in ASL. She's a professor at a college, and she talks about how that it's the way that you deliver the signs and the expression and everything else. It just matters so much. And I think if we, kind of think about information like that, it's obviously true in that micro sense of ASL, but on a larger, more macro sense, it's true in everyday communication, everyday, information of how it's spread. You base what you know based on who you heard it from, how you heard it, and things like that. And RJ definitely tries to highlight that.
Yeah. I mean, think about how many people who claim to have read the Wheel of Time books many, many times are convinced that Robert Jordan wants to be sexist and racist and homophobic to the nines, and are convinced that anything short of raging bigotry is a tarnishing of his legacy. Ostensibly, we all read the same books.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, there's another example of, like, you get out of a thing what you bring to it.
Yes.
And there's a certain amount of people who can't separate having a racist, misogynistic character in your books from the author being racist, misogynistic. Oh. And I think that is there's a problem there. There is a problem there. But at the same time, what we're finding out is a lot of authors are terribly racist and misogynistic TERFs. And we should have seen that in their books to begin with. So.
Yeah, sometimes they tell you who they are and you should listen.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's definitely both sides to that of like, ugh.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I've literally read people who unironically are arguing that Tuon is white. It's like, did you read this isn't even an interpretation, but no, it's where you are coming from can color your opinion so much that you don't see what is literally
absolutely
on the page. But speaking of on the page, I just was trying to circle. We are tangenting
hard. Yeah.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry.
You're helping.
It's this chapter's fault.
We're doing it too.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So here's a little bit of 8 dedicated rode forward and dismounted on the ground they memorized facing the mountains. One of them looked familiar. A grizzled fellow whose pointed Terran beard appeared odd on his wrinkled countryman's face. I just looked up who that was because I had to. It's not really that relevant.
I was going to, so thank you.
And again, thank you, Watt. Encyclopedia Watt is such a great reference for stuff like this because they've done the work for us. That's the guy that Rand sees in the Black Tower in Lord of Chaos, chapter 42, when he goes and visits. In Winter's Heart prologue, we find out his name is Dolano Sendomir.
Oh, yeah. I remember that name. He hangs out with Androl, right?
I like the name.
Yep. And he ends up being one of the bonded Ashaman. He bonds Ayako Norsani. She's white.
Yeah, white.
And he is one of the 6 who accompany Rand to Lady Deirdre's manor.
Oh, okay.
I was totally going to look this guy up because I'm like, I'm sure he shows up again. And then I just blew past it and didn't. So yes, I am so glad that I I knew there was a hunch there for a reason.
So yeah, he's one of those 6 that hangs out with Logain. He's one of Androl's, crew, basically.
Yeah.
Good dude.
He's a good guy, despite being currently in cahoots with people who end up bad.
Yeah.
But, again, this is one of those things where it's a very weird thing for Jordan to point out and be like, oh, yeah, I've shown you this guy before. I haven't named him. I'm going to point out that Rand recognizes him, and then he's not going to do anything.
Right.
Okay. Don't really have just had to point that out because it's a when Rand doesn't know something, I always try and figure out what it is.
Yeah. There's also a lot of Lews Therin raving. Before where we're at, we have the dead watch. The dead never close their eyes. And now where we're at now, he's got to kill them. They're too dangerous to live. He's, LTT is, had his vitamins this morning, shall we say.
Oh, yes. And one thing I noticed here, I put a star by it. Is that obviously another man channeling often brought that reaction from Lews Therin, or even a man who could. I'd never noticed that before, that Lews Therin can actually predict the ability to channel, I guess, in some. He's reading the ability to channel someone, and I'd never noticed that before in any other conversation.
Which is weird because the test for knowing if someone can channel, it's not like women where you can just sense it. They actually have to be tested. Right. So I'm not sure. Yeah. So I'm not sure how that's happening.
Maybe it's just men he knows who can channel.
After they've been tested, but before they've learned?
No, just if Rand knows. If he's like, oh, that's an Ashaman, I know he can channel. I have the heebie-jeebies. Like, maybe it's just psychosomatic completely. I
thought it was a old memory that Lews Therin had. Oh. That maybe like they didn't have like some sort of knowledge or way to check ability or whatever in people by holding the one power or whatever. I thought it was maybe an old memory that Rand was getting into, because like you said, Seth, I knew the test is very different for men and women, so it surprised me that it was just thrown in here like that.
Huh. I hadn't considered that.
Yeah, it's a bit of a plot hole in terms of like, and you can either explain it with an old memory and Lews Therin knows some way to tell a man can channel that he hasn't shared, but I really do think it's just like, if the man could channel but hasn't like been really taught yet, because he's been around a lot of potential people who like haven't really learned how to channel yet, and I'm guessing Lews Therin rants at them all the time.
Gotcha.
So that's a weird statement. You're right, that is a very weird statement. Yeah.
I still think that it's just a psychosomatic, like if he sees an Ashaman, he gets the heebie-jeebies because he knows he can channel. Like, but I never considered any alternative. So,
or a soldier, maybe. Or dedicated, or yeah,
right, yeah. Good point, Seth. Good point.
But yeah, he's Rand is getting more comfortable with just having LTT. Like, oh yeah, I'll just push him back. Oh, he's come forward again. Oh, I'll push him back. Like his relationship with LTT is that he's not pushing back as hard at this point.
Right. I feel like he's almost getting like not just used to him, but like almost like he's becoming one more tool Rand is going to use to do what he needs to do.
All right. So here's a question. I can't figure this out. Deshiva is always talking to himself, but he's not going insane, right? Deshiva's protected from the taint. He's got the Dark One's power. That's not a sign of insanity, which is what Rand always assumes it is. What the fuck what is he doing? Why is he making notes? Does he have some sort of ter'angreal that's like basically a voice recorder? Is he like
just an academic who talks to himself? I think.
Yeah.
See, I kind of agree with Aradia. I kind of thought if anything, I thought he was like grumpy that he is an academic and is having to like play with these children now who don't know what they're doing. I think Aradia is exactly right. I think he's just an academic who talks to himself. I think it was a red herring.
Then follow-up question. Is he talking to himself in common or the old tongue?
He mutters to himself in the old tongue. I think Rand thinks that a couple of chapters back.
Oh, really? I didn't catch that. But that makes sense.
That which he spoke and wrote as fluently as a scholar is the line. And I think that's in reference to him talking to himself.
Wow.
And another clue that he's Forsaken because he's not a scholar who learned it. He actually,
exactly.
That's what he knows.
But yeah, I mean, I talk to myself all the time, particularly when I'm annoyed. So, I mean, I have a lot of empathy with Deshiva here.
I talk to my food when I'm cooking. I'm like, you motherfucking burger, you're fucking, why aren't you done yet? God damn it, cheese, melt! You know, like.
Brandon talks nicely to the food as he cooks it. He's like, are we comfortable? Okay, let's just get you tucked in. He talks to his food like that.
It's a little different in a professional kitchen when you got a time constraint. Fucking cook already!
True.
God damn it, thermodynamics, work faster.
I talk to software a lot. A lot. It does not listen. But oh boy, do I talk to it.
Also with the Shiva, I mean, imagine you turn to the Dark One for immortality as this, clinician and academic and everything else. And yet you're living in this world as, this old countryman. Like, you got to be a little pissed. You're like, wait, this is not the immortality I wanted.
This is not the eternal life I signed up for. Watching these idiots ruin everything. Oh my God. Yeah,
exactly.
No, it's just this constant monologue bitch fest for him.
Right. In old tongue.
Old tongue. It's like, yes, a Shakespearean bitch fest over there.
Yeah. I love that already.
Or it would be like, one of the Roman emperors coming back and being told, "You're now a foot soldier," and just muttering to himself in Roman the whole time.
Marcus Aurelius, just like, what the fuck is this boot camp?
Latin.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
In Roman, in Latin.
Yeah.
They're doing it wrong. They're all doing it wrong.
Yeah, totally. Okay, so Nynaeve, talking about the dreads. Yes, Rand, you are paranoid. Rand has accurately diagnosed himself as having like clinical paranoia. Correct. Nynaeve would definitely say you have the dreads, Rand. Yes. I do like, though, that RJ puts it in there that, like, no, this is something that can happen to anyone. Like, spiraling into paranoia and fear is not necessarily just a man who can channel thing or a Dragon Reborn thing. Like, mental health breaks down. It just happens. There have been people in the Two Rivers that just, for some reason, ended up in this hole and couldn't get out. And it's just nice to be reminded that normal people have mental health issues, not just heroes.
I'm nodding. Hashtag mental health month.
Yes. God, everyone go drink some water and think about therapy. Jesus.
So they go through the gateway, Rand first because he's, running away from the dreads.
And whose gateway does he go through?
Through Flynn's.
Flynn's, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Flynn's because it was the largest. That's a good trivia question.
Right, because he's tall, so he's got he even has to duck through the largest one.
Yeah. I thought that was interesting, the whole fact that it was Flynn's because it was the largest. So I circled that.
And then we get a little bit more about power mechanics. The Ashaman could travel short distances without first memorizing the ground they left from and cover ground far faster than riding. We also then get, later on, Rand uses the fact a short gateway then lets him open up a longer gateway.
Right.
And that's I feel like that's an evolving of the mechanic, and I do feel like Jordan is retconning that a little bit for the sake of using gateways. Like, I'm not a super fan of this mechanic.
I like the idea that you can travel short distances, like if you can see it, like to hop from one side of the valley to the other and skip the intervening space. I like that as a mechanic. That makes sense to me. But the second evolution later on is just like, that's OP.
Right.
You already had fast travel. Calm down.
Right. I completely agree. I think it makes it a little unnecessary, and it's a little, breaking the laws of physics, I guess, or cheating.
Yeah, he just set up this rule that you have to memorize the space before you open a gateway. And with this one sentence, I feel like he's like, yeah, never mind. Like that was a pain in the ass. I'm not using that anymore.
And it may have just been, it was a pain in the ass to constantly have to figure that out when you're riding. So he's like, let me invent a way that's going to make my riding easier.
Mm-hmm. Right. It's like, I don't want to have to do a long rest every time I use my gateway spell slot.
Right. I've got to get through all these books.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But yeah, so they all go through into Altara, and then some of the Ashaman start leapfrogging ahead in order to, or like skip stitching ahead, basically, not leapfrogging, more like skip stitching, to find the Seanchan, so that way then everyone can focus on.
Yeah, I think of it like spider webbing out, trying to find like they punch a hole in the middle, and then there's these cracks like spreading out to try and find where the army is.
I love that visualization. I would love like seeing when you actually like get off the page and actually think about what that looks like, of them just skipping out and spider webbing out. That's an amazing like scene that like I would love to see in the TV, like of this.
It would literally look like men and horses sewing their way through the landscape, just like jump up and then under, then up and then under. Oh
yeah,
yes.
Which, and I love the weaving analogy that we already get a lot, like that's just, hey, like, threads in a weave. Where have we heard that before?
Sewing the pattern. Oh my God. That would be so cool. It'd be like a nice drone shot, like aerially over it, and these like silver flashes.
Yes. Silver flashes. That's exactly what I thought. I thought that could be like a monumental episode.
Right, and then I guess if you're standing in the middle, once they get over the nearest ridge, all you're going to see is flashes of lights like reflecting in the clouds in the sky and going out and like,
kind of like on the airport runway, like the lights are running out.
Yeah. Well, and then just how genius it is, because as you got the spider webbing out, they're also relaying information back. So from an aerial view, you see this large army just kind of come through, and then they start steering themselves almost like a being that has its own mind. Yeah. Like they almost like the army itself is moving. Yes, sub-organizing. So it like kind of bends to wherever the Ashaman are telling them, here's where the Seanchan are. That's I think it's a really cool strategy. I'm not big into battle strategies, but that's a really cool one.
Yeah, speaking of battle strategy, the next detail that I have is the actual geography of it, because I'm trying to pay attention to the geography. And so my geography rant is very short this time, because we have talked repeatedly about the Cabal Deep and the position of Ebu Dar and the coming in of the Seanchan. But there is this line here. The rest of the army began emerging. Rand rode up the valley in the direction the Ashaman had gone. Mountains rose high behind him, a wall fronting the deep, but west the peaks ran almost to Ebu Dar. So if you go and look at the front map, he's basically coming in on the Ilion Altara border on like the downslope side of that. So he's looking down slope at all of Altara basically, and there's mountains going off to his right. So he's got the mountains at his back and Ilion more or less at his back, and the mountains are going off to his right towards where the Seanchan are. And if he looks more straight down to his left, then technically the Cabal Deep is down there, but I guess there's like intervening hillsides and stuff. So that's just kind of to locate yourself in the story with respect to all the lectures I've been giving about geography. That's where we are.
I appreciate that. That helps me, because I know I get an idea of where he is somewhere in the map, but I love the specific place. Almost like, oh, you're not just a Radiopedia, you're a Radio GPS for Ranland.
And we do later hear about Shiota and Eraharn, which are two countries who actually were in the region of present-day Altara and Ilion. So when you say you're on the border of those two, well, that country was like basically both of those combined.
Right. And that discussion includes the cover art. That is the discussion of the scene that is the cover art.
Oh, yes.
Which is, yeah, it's one of the best suite covers, really, because it is a very accurate depiction of a scene. And that scene is here in this chapter.
Yes, I did pick that up. I did notice that. And it is, like you said, one of the few times that Sweet like actually took something out of a book.
Yeah, like right out of the book. It's great. But first we get this amazing line from Bashir. Tenobi is likely to have my head on a pike soon enough for following a live dragon reborn, much more a dead one. I love Bashir. I love him.
Yes, he is amazing. He's so pragmatic.
I do have to go back to the Daniel Sweet cover, and you're like, this is one of the better ones. The one thing I'll say, and I don't know if you remember this, when this book came out, he had the dragon banner upside down on the cover.
No.
Yes. And they
Yes, I do remember that.
And they had to go back and actually paint over that in the newer versions. So if you can find a version of cover of this book, the original painting had the fang. Like, and actually I can see it. I just Googled Path of Daggers and I can see the original painting, and it has the white as the fang and the black as the tear.
Okay. Yes, I remember that now when it came out. It was almost like a controversy.
It was a huge controversy. Yeah, it was just look fucking how bad Daniel Sweet is. He can't even get the most basic symbolism of the books right.
And that's one thing I think that has kind of gone away as the fandom has evolved. But like back in the day when we were first reading, there was so much hate for Darrell Sweet. Like, I hope he's not listening. You've done a great job, man. All best to you. But back in the day when I was a 20-something-year-old kid, like I would just rant on Darrell Sweet, and like even like I get on like Whatmania or whatever, and like people just like hated on Darrell Sweet for those damn covers. And it's kind of gone away. People don't seem to obsess so much over them now they used to.
It's because we have new covers. And, I feel like that's really, it's like, oh, well, yeah, we all know those are bad. And like, there's some nostalgia for them because we all carried them around, and there was the whole like the books used to fall apart because they were so big that the glue wasn't designed to hold the covers on, and like there was a lot of like physical stuff about that. But now we all have ebooks, we all have the new covers. I feel like there's a little bit of like, yeah, whatever. There's a nostalgia to just how bad they are.
Yes. Well, and we also we all have content that we can go to now on the internet to supplement our Wheel of Time love. We're not literally staring at the old cover for 4 years while waiting for the next book to come out. You know, back then there was nothing else to do.
Yeah. And that being the only piece of art we have at all, we're like, what does Rand look like? The only reference we had was these covers.
Yes. Yeah, because I had Robert Jordan before I had the internet, you know.
And I'll be honest, this is probably my favorite sweet Rand.
It's a good Rand.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, he's not the Harlequin romance Rand. That's the Rand I hate.
Yeah. Oh, God.
Lord of Chaos and Crown of Swords. Those are the two worst Rands.
About Lord of Chaos just for the sheer absurdism of it. Like the romance cover amount of shirt billowing open. But yes, no, this is one of the most believable Rands of the sweet covers.
And yeah, I like the quote unquote Crown of Swords that we see in his image. Yeah.
Yeah. And also, I actually, going back to the chapter in Path of Daggers on my rereads has become actually one of my, it's not up there with Shadow Rising or Fires of Heaven, but it's become one of my books I actually enjoy reading again the most, because I think it's so adult. It's so that fog of war, like you guys have been talking about. It's so real to me. This book is so real to me of just, and I kind of like the fact that it's kind of like adulting, where you don't always have a beginning, you don't always have an end, and sometimes you're just coping to get through, and no one tells you that, you know. And I feel like Path of Daggers kind of just captures that. It's where Rand is right now. It's kind of where the story is right now, and it may have even been where RJ was when he was writing it. Like he's like, I don't know where we're going to end this, how we're going to tie this up, but we're going to slog through it together.
I like that. So Rand has a whole paranoid paragraph where he's just very paranoid for literally a paragraph. And then we get the description of the cover art. And Rand makes conversation with Bashir to take away from his mental health struggles that are affecting his strategy by sort of be like, hey, I wonder what's up with the statue. And then Bashir does a Varen basically and just completely goes off and tells Rand 18
total
more
Varen
of detail than he actually asked for.
Which is amazing that Bashir is not only a soldier, but also from the borderlands and knows this much history about a southern country that's not even in existence anymore.
Right,
you know?
Right. Yeah, he knows more about these lands than the people who live here, even though it's not his territory. And classical education, man, it pays off sometimes.
Well, and I even wrote, I mean, I'll show you right here on my notes. I wrote Varen 101.
Nice.
Because I was like, Rainey's going to call that a Varen moment. I know she is.
So, and just to give you a little bit of background, Arahorn was one of the 10 nations that formed right after the breaking. It survived the Trolloc Wars, but fell apart shortly thereafter due to just all the chaos in the world. And then Shiota rose up in its place once it fell apart.
Oh, gotcha. Okay, so they were successive nations.
Yes, so they were one right after. So when he's saying this statue is old, but not that old, he's saying it's about 2,000 years old, not 3,000 years old. And he said, I once saw a statue that was 3,000 years old and it was falling apart. Like this statue is not that old. It's not that worn. Gotcha. So, but they were both the countries that existed in this place before the present day Altara and Ilion.
Nice. And then he uses that rant in a very Brown Aja way. He uses this rambling rant to tell Rand to not be quite so careless with his life, because seriously, dude, you're the dragon. Could you not die being an idiot, please?
Right.
Yeah, running through that gateway to get away from his mental health issues almost put him in hot water. Like, what if he walked into the middle of a Seanchan army, on the other side of the hill, and they were just like, oh yeah, let's kill him really quick. Yeah.
Everybody dies eventually, and everybody is forgotten eventually, but there's no bloody point in dying before your time comes.
Right. And that's one reason I love Bashir a lot in this book, because I feel like Bashir just really helps make Rand the man he needed to be, the emperor he needed to be. He was right there almost as a father figure in a way that I don't think anyone else could be at this time in his life. And I love that about Bashir. I love that Bashir brought that to him.
He's a good father-in-law.
Yeah.
It also really brings up the four generals and just how good they are and powerful they are, right? The idea that the four generals are very smart, very well educated people, and they're going to be pivotal in the last battle.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Which I think is great bait and switch. I really love that whole, like, I think that's one of Sanderson's, or one of the greatest parts of those books is when you're set up to think, oh, these 4 generals are going to, do the 4 battlefronts. It's going to be great. And then you realize, nope, they need Matt.
It's just all going to be Matt.
Well, and Matt just shines. Matt just absolutely shines. I think it's one of the better times that Sanderson got Matt.
Yeah, so next, Rand is like, I'm not going to die. And then very nearly dies. Pretty much is exactly what happens. The pattern like slaps him down for his hubris real quick.
Right, a few seconds later.
So yeah, this is the assassination attempt when Eagan Padros fires an arrow at Rand, and there's never really a good explanation why. There's never any real follow-up. It's just Eagan Padros tried to kill Rand, gets blown apart for his troubles, and gets left for the Ravens.
I have theories.
Okay, let's hear them.
All right. So first of all, he is one of Lord Bren's followers. He's Dark Friend, right? Like, almost without a doubt, like he was a Dark Friend the whole time.
Headcanon, but yes, it's plausible. Very plausible.
Headcanon, yes. This is all, there's no, again, I'm definitely want to preface this with, I have no evidence whatsoever for any of this. Second, we see him killed, like, he gets his shot, and then the Ashaman kill him. I think Rochide is the one who gave him the coins to fire the arrow. Oh. And the reason he's down there looking for the coins is so he can say, hey, I know I gave him these Tarvalin marks. I'm going to use it to throw the Tarvalin witches under the bus. Yeah. Gotcha. That this was very much a setup by Rochide, not to, yes, kill Rand if possible, but if not, set up the Aes Sedai. And that's why he's implicate them. And that's why he's so disappointed. He throws that coin at Rand, and Rand ignores it and doesn't catch it. And Lord Bren is like, everyone's got some Tarvalon marks. Like, I think Rochide is actually very disappointed that his plot fails.
I could totally see that, because it seems like they're trying to kill Rand in that really casual, incompetent way that we've seen Dark Friends and Forsaken do over the first 8 books, right? And Taim is kind of like, hey, see how easy it is to kill Rand, or at least just throw shade on his followers. And let's see how well you do in the field. Worst case scenario, you just throw shade on his followers. Like, that does tie up all the pieces and explain why there's nothing really bigger to be had about it. It's just like a low level attack to see how those guys do.
Yeah, it was almost like a roll of the dice to see, hey, if it works, we kill Rand. If not, then, it's very, very low risk and high reward.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I agree that, because I was like, how do you know he's a Dark Friend? It makes no sense. But you're right, being like, I planted this evidence so that I can deliver this line. Surely my brilliance is going to win the day. Oh no, it didn't work because I'm a low-level henchman that can't fucking tie his own shoes.
Mm-hmm. So that's my theory.
Right.
That's all I got. Because someone gave him the money. Someone had to give him the Tarvalon marks. Like, he didn't just have those.
Right.
And it would make sense that another Dark Friend would set him up. And the only one who gets mentioned here is Rochide, who's just, like, on his knee. I don't know. It's
who happens to be the one searching. Yeah, I mean.
Yeah, so it's a very tenuous link, but that's what I got.
That's good.
Yeah. I like at the end of that same paragraph where it talks about both men held Sidin, and he said surprisingly Lews Therin only moaned. And I kind of just wanted, like, I didn't know, like, if you guys had any, like, thoughts about, like, because usually he's talked about how that it usually sets Lews Therin off, but yet here it's like he just moaned. And it's like, I didn't know if it was, like, just the closeness to death that, like, kind of, like, settled him out, or if you thought there was any other reason why Lews Therin didn't react.
I mean, the fact that they seized the power and saved Rand's life with it, as like that, like, what do you do in that situation?
Dude,
yeah.
That goes back to, though, why we didn't see so much of the fact that Rand was crazy, because you're right. There's Lews Therin is Rand, so therefore, if there's a part of Rand that is grateful for being saved, he's not going to rant and rave and everything, because it's all the same person. It's not the crazy person in his head.
Right. And, like, Rand just got really run through the ringer when the attack happens, right? Because he loses the power and, like, vomits violently and is afraid that he might have burned himself out. So him and LTT both just got sucker punched by the power, and these guys saved him. So yeah, like, he's tired, he's grateful, he's confused. It makes sense that his only response is just moaning in the corner, like, ow, thanks, I guess.
Yeah, okay. Thank you both.
And I do think that the reason he loses the power is, again, there were 2 archers, right? That's just him seeing double again. That's the whole crossing of the streams. I don't know if there's an effect from...
There weren't two archers.
No.
No.
It's seeing double, yeah.
He was seeing double. Okay. I was like, where was the other archer?
In his head.
No, it's the same archer being seen twice. Yeah.
Oh my God. Okay. That makes, wow. Okay. I want to go back and read this again now.
So yeah, he's seeing double, and that's what's causing the vomiting and the confusion. I don't think there's an effect from the Bowl of the Winds, right? Because now that we're closer to Ebu Dar, there is that sort of, and we see that more with the Domani, there is that sickness that they talk about, and that's from using the Bowl of the Winds in Ebu Dar. But I think they're far enough away, and we see that again from the Domani that are close by, they're no longer being affected. They're far enough away from Ebu Dar that is not really affecting them in this location. I think it's just the crossing of the streams and the doubling of the power that causes him to lose it.
Agreed. Because he doesn't even do anything with the power here. He just seizes the power, and that is already enough to send him into the vomiting fit. He doesn't actually get a chance to get up to the point where that weirdness around Ebu Dar would matter. He's purely experiencing the sickness in himself, which has to do with the crossing of the streams. Yeah.
But I do have a question. We saw him seize it, like earlier in this chapter, he had seized it in the tent and was holding on to it. And now he had to re-seize it. I didn't catch when he let it go.
He loses it in the shock of knowing that everyone knows about his thing with women. He loses it in his shock, and it's like, Rand,
gotcha. That's when he loses it.
You put so much effort into having it already, and you let this be what knocks you off your game? Like, go have a Snickers. You are tired.
Gotcha.
Yeah, good catch.
Good catch. Yeah, because I was like, when did he lose it? And that's, yep.
Yeah. It's sort of buried in the whole, like, oh my God, the women are talking about me thing. But yeah, that's when.
In the next chapter too, I thought it was interesting where we get the power thing. He says that was the way it was with men, about them leaping up in strength, and women seemed to gain smoothly, but men suddenly jumped. And I wrote by the side, like, is that basically what forcing does? Because I always felt like what men do is they force men to grow, which I think is kind of what Egwene had to do with the Seanchan. And I wondered, like, if that's like an effect, I guess, of forcing, maybe, you know.
I would disagree. I would think that forcing, if you're gaining at a steady rate, forcing in women just increases that rate.
Oh, okay.
Whereas, and yes, all these men are being forced. I agree with that, but I still think they're forced and they stair step up. I think that is an inherent difference between how men and how women gain power. Men are at one level and then they just get better, and then they're at that level for a while. And like, you can force them to get better quicker, but it's still stair stepping.
Okay, I have to make one little tangent. Going back to your old analogy about sex and the one power, like, is that totally describes, like, you know, women just, you know, they just kind of get better and they kind of grow into it. Men, like, we have to be told, but hey, we make a big jump. When we get it right, when we find the North Harbor on Tarvalon, we make a good thing. So thank you for that all those years ago.
I enjoy that, but my analogy is much less perverse. Basically, men are kind of like digital, and women are like analog.
Yep.
Oh, okay. I like that already.
Yeah, just thinking of stair step versus a smooth curve, you know, like.
Yeah.
Discrete mathematics versus continuous.
Right, exactly.
Well, and it also plays into, like, you know, the old adages of, you know, like the divine feminine is always like, you know, curve and circular and round, whereas masculine tends to be angles and lines and hard. And so it's kind of, even like visually, it's that same kind of, like you said, Seth, with the stair steps.
Yeah, it's definitely playing into the women are from Mars, men are from Venus. Like, this is part of that, is like, even the way we gain power is just like fundamentally mathematically different. But yeah, I agree that forcing increases the rate of change, not the kind of change.
Okay. I'm totally on board with that, Seth. You convinced me. That was a great answer.
In chat, Jedi Pants says, I teach discrete mathematics. Ain't no way in hell I use that analogy at the start of any year.
I'm just saying, it'll stick in people's minds. And, you know, sometimes as a teacher, you just got to do what sticks.
Yeah. Oh, and shout out to Jedi Pants. Jedi Pants was so nice when I first joined Discord. Gave me a hug, like, virtually, and it just meant the world to me. So thank you, Jedi Pants. I want to shout out now that I get the opportunity to.
Jedi Pants is cool.
And Kevin's been great too.
Oh yeah, Kevin's neat. Kevin's nice. right, so Rand thinks more about how he isn't paranoid because he's definitely paranoid, and wonders about what happened with Padros. Like, why? He's crying to the sky. Why?
Very Shakespeare.
Yes, we've already talked about it. And then he does this. So then the news of the Seanchan contact has been made. He's like, we found them. And they're like, what should we do with the body? And Rand just is like, leave him. It's so grim. He's just like, this guy's been blown apart. His leg is 20 feet over that way. We're not going to bury him. We're not.
Oh, yeah.
You noticed a fireball blew off his hand and arm?
Oh, I noticed the burned hole in his chest. I didn't.
Oh, I did notice that.
Fireballs the size of fists suddenly stroked the archer. He screamed as his arm spun away, hands still gripping the bow.
Which is an amazing visual.
Hands and Rand are just. It's not a good time.
Some foreshadowing.
And fireballs.
Yeah.
And fireballs.
And then Luce Theron asks in a very non-insane way, are you ready to kill now? And Rand, fully committing to the madness, is like, not yet. Just give me a minute. Soon. One more chapter. LTT.
Yeah.
Which I think that's such a great line. Are you ready to kill now? I mean, just that's
so scary. And yeah, they
dark.
They start heading down towards the battle and to the east. So the mountains that were behind them, off to the left, if they're riding towards the Seanchan, off to their left, more storm clouds are building because we need the real fog of war and storm of battle.
Yep. And this is the final mention of the Ceramos storm in these books, Ceramos storms.
Yes.
It was mostly in the last chapter. It was mentioned once in this chapter and then never again.
It breaks and then no storms ever happen again in the whole plot.
Which I know that in the last episode you guys talked about that, like if there's any like real world connection or whatever. The only thing I could think of was, again, back in Roman, I remember hearing or reading about like there was some sort of like Mediterranean storm or something that would come through every year or every like so many years at the same time, and it actually gave it a name that would like I think like Sirocco or something like that. I forget. I can't. I don't have all my facts together, but I always thought about that, like this is like named kind of storm system that kind of comes through every so often or whatever. That's what I kind of thought.
Yeah, annual weather pattern that just. No, yeah, probably.
Mm-hmm.
That's probably, we couldn't find anything before, so that's very likely to be the thing if he didn't just literally make it up. But he probably didn't. He liked riffing off of stuff. I mean, it's a good bet.
I'm sure it's from something. It's just identifying what that something is not always easy.
Yeah.
Again, like factoring is harder than multiplying. Going backwards is hard. Yeah.
Yes.
And then we switch POV to one of our only Seanchan POV, and it's a fun one.
Yes. I love Seanchan POVs.
So we are with Assid Bakuun, who I don't know if we get a POV from him again. I don't think we do. I think this is the only time we see Bakuun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I looked him up when I was reading it. I think this is the only time he's like we get his point of view.
Oh, I just noticed a typo in mine. The first time his name shows up, it has a W in it, Bakuun. And then on the next page, it goes Bakun. They drop one of the U's literally from one page to the next. Oh, and then it shows up again with a W as I keep going.
Really?
Okay. Huh. Okay, so there's just one with a single U.
I think the W is the official spelling.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's the non-typo was the typo.
And the Bakun does not appear in the ebook.
Okay, so that was an error that they caught later yet. Then.
Yeah. It's also not in the paperback.
Okay, I'm in a hardback, so. But yeah, so Bakuun has been 30 years in the ever victorious army. He's a just complete army man, does all of his stuff very without thought, doesn't take pride in doing a good job because he's been doing it so well.
I like that we hear that it took 2 generations to build the ships.
Yeah, that's the really cool part is he was always going to be part of this mission because it has taken 2 generations for them to build the fleet. And that's why you can't stop it, right? Like the Forerunners show up to start preparing the way. It doesn't matter how good of a job they do because 2 generations worth of ships have already set sail and are coming behind. And that's what's going to happen.
Yeah. I think that's a great thing to point out, too, because I highlighted just above that where it said the bulk of those years, his 30 years, were spent preparing for this. And I think it was RJ dropping that I don't think most readers fully appreciate, like you said, Aradia, exactly how long the Seanchan have been prepared. I mean, there are people that have grown up their whole life knowing this is coming, this is happening, and how that affects, your mindset as a nation.
Yeah, because I don't think when he says generation, I don't think he means a 21-year generation. I think he means a full life, birth, death, cycle. He's talking 80 years to 80-year generations. So it's gotta have been close to 200 years since this project was first officially initiated from the Crystal Throne.
Which, I gotta say, that's kind of amazing that you can, it makes me a little scared of China, to be honest with you. You can force that much human capital for that long to accomplish a goal that's that far out.
Well, and this goes back to my theory on the Crystal Throne. It's a compulsion.
Yes.
It's a compulsion device, right? This is one of the ways you're able to unite a kingdom. Is anyone who rebels, you bring them into the throne and compel them to obey you.
Yes.
Yeah. It also makes me think of, for anyone who's read A Three-Body Problem. In book 2, there is a similar intergenerational. It's going to take us 400 years to build these spaceships in anticipation because space travel takes so long that, I won't spoil the story, but that idea, and you say you're afraid of China, that story's set in China. And they bend to it with a will and are 400-year plan. Here's our timetable. Let's go. That's just that's not even the conflict of the story, right? That's just the base world building. That's happening. And then here's a conflict inside it.
It is a weakness, I think, of our current, the way we're set up is for very short-term profits. And so it becomes very difficult to have even long-term projects, much less multi-generational projects in our society. We don't have a good way to do that. And I see that with the NASA program, where it's it's taken us so long to get back to the moon and go to Mars because every time a new administration comes in, they change the goals of NASA. And so you can't, and the projects NASA has to do take longer than any single administration. Yep.
It's why we don't have effective climate change management, is because thinking in 30-year increments, whatever.
Yeah, we can barely make it 2.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think part of it is, I've said this for so long during my entire adulthood, is America does not have any real appreciation for exactly how young we are. And how much America has come onto center stage in a short period of time after being around for a short period of time. You realize China was fighting people that were also fighting the Romans at the same time.
Right.
And they're still here. Thousands of years of history.
Or how the Roman Empire took roughly 400 years to fall.
Longer than we've been around. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
We're only 250 over here. We're not even
longer than we've been around.
So it's. Yeah, I agree.
Right.
Geology, right? Geology gives you a better appreciation for time, and it makes human stuff really hard to reconcile. Yes. And then you have to study history so you can start to get human granularity on your sense of deep time. Because when you're give or take a million years, then...
and then you know too much and you get depressed.
Because it's really cool rocks that formed 35 million years ago. And it's yes. Ooh, and now listen about banded iron formations.
I do have a quick question. Of the 3 kinds of rock, what is your favorite kind?
It's gotta be igneous. It's gotta be.
Me too. Okay, yeah, me too. Okay, go ahead. Sorry. We just I had to geek out without. I told myself if I ever get on, I'm gonna ask a radio what her favorite kind of rock is.
But I guess, but my favorite kinds of rock, specific kinds of rock.
Sorry, off air. We can talk more.
Metamorphic rocks are the signatures of subduction zones, which are the coolest zones.
Absolutely. I agree. Yeah, very cool.
Serpentinite is kind of the coolest thing. And blue schist. Who doesn't like a good blue schist? Okay, I'm sorry. No, I'm just showing off.
You are very showing off. You're out of my league. Above my pay grade.
I love sharing about rocks.
I was going to say, one of my favorite facts is that sharks are older than trees.
Oh,
wow.
Yeah.
Trees evolved more recently than sharks.
And sharks are like crocodiles.
Wow.
They just don't change. You just go back in the fossil record and it's they get bigger or smaller according to the temperature. That's about it. So cool.
Yeah. Yeah. When you really understand evolution and you understand it's not all just a linear thing, like how things develop in different orders and everything. I mean, it's fascinating. It's fascinating.
Yeah. Or like, I mean, think about crocodiles. Crocodiles, they haven't changed like 400 million years, right? They absolutely give way to hippopotamuses. Hippos are mammals, right? Like they evolved so much more recently, and crocodiles give way.
Right.
Crocodiles are like, nope, it's all you, king. It's fine. You can chew on my tail. It's cool. Like they don't need to evolve around it, but
exactly.
It's like, they've been after 400 million years without changing, and hippos show up and are like, mine now, and it's just so great. I love hippos.
Also, like how much the atmosphere has changed, like we used to have iron, and all the iron on the ground that we dig up comes from bacteria releasing oxygen, the oxygen reacting with iron in the atmosphere, and that iron raining down, causing extinction events.
Banded iron formation.
Damn,
so
that's
cool.
amazing.
Right, yeah. And they are the result of biology, not the result of natural iron depositions in the ground.
Right.
All of our iron was just not iron oxide.
Iron ions. I'm
not sure what it was bonded with, but oxygen is such a reactive molecule. It stripped the iron out of the atmosphere, reacted with it, and rained down as iron oxide.
And then after that, it poisoned the atmosphere, so that way the life forms that made all the oxygen couldn't live anymore, and oxygen-consuming life like us could eventually evolve. It's so cool.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, and you know, it's stuff like that allows you to kind of take that perspective back when you get so bogged down, whether it's in the book or in politics or climate change or whatever else that we're dealing with this week in the year 2022, is that, you know, there's so much potential in every little thing. The fact that, you know, oxygen producing things created iron that now is in the ground. Like, who could have ever predicted that? It's so random. It's so beautiful in and of itself. And that's kind of where I get my hope and grace from, is like, you know what? There's just so much that we don't know that is out of our control that is going to save itself in some way. You know, I mean, I don't know. I think it's just beautiful.
I'm nodding.
Yeah, it's going to save itself, but it's not going to save us, is where I'm going with that. Yeah. Like, there's a certain amount of
that may be true.
We as humans, like, humans existing are very fragile and exist in a very narrow band of existence, and we are quickly destroying that band of existence. And yes, life will exist, but humans, or to summarize George Carlin, the planet is fine. People are screwed.
Yeah. No, but I mean, that's why I picked geology to study, is because there is that sense of grace and beauty, being like mountain ranges rise and fall regardless of whatever silly monkeys are running around on top of them.
Yes.
It's fine.
Right. Well, my brother came up with a theory years ago that human beings are actually a virus.
We sure are.
And that we are a virus and will eventually eradicate ourselves because we are not good for the environment that we are placed in.
Okay, Agent Smith.
What was it? 2 episodes ago, you said you thought Agent Smith was right?
Yeah. No, I mean, Agent Smith and Morden have a lot in common.
Yes.
But anyhow, escapism. Come on, guys. Let's focus. Focus on
Sorry.
escapism. So the next thing I have is Bakuun had never expected to find himself with well over half his command descendants of thieves, and unashamed of it. They would look you right in the eyes. Like,
yes!
Driving home that cultural disconnect between the Seanchan and the invadees, which in this case is Terrabonners.
I wrote by the side of my notes, democracy, because I feel like that's a huge advantage of democracy, is because it democratizes everyone. But then you have so much individualism. You get people that are how many people in America do we have that are proud to be thieves? You know, it's kind of just a mindset. We lose some of that respect for honor, I'll let Dan Carlin talk about the Romans and how they respected all the ancestors. And of course, the Chinese and their whole history. Whereas, democracy, especially American democracy, we're like, oh yeah, we're a bunch of bandits. We're a bunch of, or Australia even,
Yeah,
shout out Australia.
Really.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, and what I'd say is the Terrabonners don't think of themselves as thieves.
No,
they're like, no, this is our land. What are you talking about? You're the invader. And like, yes, we're now serving you. And what I see here is effective leadership making the difference. That like the Terrabonners were essentially a group of chaotic, useless people. You bring in good leadership. There are good people everywhere if you can bring in leaders that can actually point them towards a goal.
Yeah. Structure.
True.
And remember, most people don't quit jobs because they hate the job. It's because they hate their manager.
Yeah.
Also true.
And these guys don't just offer structure. They also offer like food and shoes and other things that the regional leaders have been iffy on.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Well, and even like, imagine, going through this pandemic, like just the need for stability that people have. And, especially, people who are just doing their daily lives, who aren't all up in arms or aren't all informed, or, they're just trying to make it. And then on top of it, they have all this supply chain and pandemic and everything else going on. They just want someone to make things stable. They're looking for some stability. So I imagine this is what it would be like in Tarabon. You've got decades of corruption and war and everything else. And you get these people that come in and they actually give you a sense of stability. They allow you to kind of just live your life.
Oh, man. My husband sent me a comic the other day. I think it was from SMBC. That was this person, two people talking, and one person goes to the other. It's like, there's a conspiracy. These people are in charge of the government. And the person's like, oh, thank God. It's like, wait, but they're like lizard people, pedophiles that are eating people alive. It's like, thank God somebody's in charge.
Yeah, at least they have a plan. Yeah.
Yeah. So these people with insect helmets, at least somebody's in charge.
That's great. And to Seth's point, if one thing you can say about the Seanchan, they know how to lead. They know how to lead. They know how to administrate. They know how to, despite some of the cultural disconnect, they know how to effectively leverage local leadership. Kind of like the British in India, they do a good job at that. And there's a thought that Rand has right before he has his meltdown, right before Veins of Gold, where he's like, fuck, I did worse than the Seanchan. The Seanchan are taking away my people's freedoms and their liberties and they're feeding them and driving down the crime rate. and that's part of what really brings giving them
him
peace.
Into his Veins of Gold epiphany is that realization that they are awful slavers and they are doing a way better job than the savior of the world.
Yeah, and that's a tough thing when you're like, the slavers are doing a better job than me.
That's complicated.
Yes. Well, I think, again, to get political, I feel like that's kind of what America has going to have some sort of recognition with, that
Absolutely.
we have not been the best steward that we could have been during our tenure as superpower.
And there is some of my freedom, my freedoms in that, like the idea that we cannot take. There's power in having diversity in our society where you have people with different opinions. Yes. But there's also power in some conformity and having everyone pointed at one goal, just like we were talking about earlier. Having long-term goals is harder when everyone can just make up their minds to be doing something different.
Yeah, it's almost like there's no perfect system.
Yeah. Well, to quote Ben Franklin, democracy is horrible and it's the worst system except for all the other ones.
I love that quote. It's awful, but it's the least awful. It's
But and I think part of the questioning is some people are questioning now, is it the least awful?
Yes, I agree with you, Seth.
Right.
I agree with you.
Right. It's a question we have to reckon with, and it's a question that Randland is ultimately going to have to reckon with in the Fourth Age. Once the dust of the battle has settled, they have to reckon with the fact that slavers are in charge of half the world. And what are you going to do about that? I understand why it got kicked down the road for the duration of the books, because the last battle is about to happen. But that is going to be the first issue that the Fourth Age has to wrestle with.
Absolutely.
And also, Jordan doesn't have a solution. No. Sanderson doesn't have a solution. They don't know what the perfect government is. Any government they pick is going to have issues, so.
That's so amazing because my business partner, my best friend, is from the Balkans. And we, talk about that area a lot and everything and just, all this. And I was like, well, what do you think what is like a good first step to fixing this or whatever? Because it's just so convoluted. And he was like, I don't know. They're like, you don't know. You know, I mean, and I feel like that's kind of what RJ's saying about, you know, even here. I think it's one reason why in this chapter, the Seanchan or in this book, the Seanchan aren't decisively done away with, is because I think RJ loves those gray areas. He loves to leave them open to explore because that's where life happens. That's where iron is created from oxygen, you know, is in that gray area of we don't have an answer, you know.
That's one of the things I hate most about Veins of Gold is that it's one of the times when I feel like he does wrap everything up with a neat, pat answer, and it feels very out of character because he takes so many of these other issues. And yeah, it's like, nah, your mileage may vary. It's gray. Veins of Gold, I feel like he just railroads a solution.
Oh, see, I actually love that because I feel like what RJ is saying is all this other stuff is temporary, is ephemeral. But who you are as a person or who we are as a nation or society or people or human race, that is ultimately what governs everything. That's what governs every decision we make, whatever government we create. It all goes back to who we are in our intentions, in our inside. So to me, I love that he forced that through because to me it was, but I also come from a, you know, evangelical Pentecostal background. To me, that was like a sermon, you know, it's like, hey, we're ready for altar call. You do that. Cause I was like, oh yeah, it's all about who you are. It's all about who you are.
The way I see it is the only thing we actually have control over is ourselves.
Amen. Amen.
Like,
yes.
That we only make the best decisions we can make. We cannot go out there and force the world to conform to our opinion. No. You can only be the best person you can be, and then you have to let the world take care of itself. And I think that that's a transition in Rand's thinking from I have to control the world to I can only control myself.
And I think just taking it one step further, and this again goes back to Veins of Gold, when you make that decision to accept that you have no control over everything else and you only have control over yourself, you have to start working on yourself. And I think it's when you start improving yourself. And then from there, that's exactly why Veins of Gold is so powerful, because if everyone actually worked on themselves, the only thing they have in their control, that's how you create a better world, because you've got better people in the world who are then working together.
Sure. Yeah. I guess I'm just early enough on in my therapy journey and my age journey that that's still a bunch of theoretical shit that my therapist says and I nod to and then I completely reject because I actually can be perfect if I just beat myself up a little more. Swear to God. Any one of these days.
Okay, Arady, again, we need to talk offside because this is a whole different conversation. But let me tell you and anyone else out there, beating yourself up is the worst way to motivate yourself.
Academically, I agree.
Absolute worst. You will never get to where you want to go by being negative to yourself. You will never get there.
Yeah. So maybe Veins of Gold is one of those things that's going to continue to age really well for me as I continue.
Yeah.
And I acknowledge there's no way to get better by beating yourself up. That doesn't mean it doesn't still happen sometimes. Even.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Old habits die hard, right?
All right, we are gonna finish this chapter, I swear to God.
Yep.
Yes.
So mostly, I guess, Suldam. He goes over and talks to the Suldam and...
Yes.
Yeah, and has this whole interaction, because the Suldam seem to be treating the Damani like a person. Like, they don't even have the bracelet on, and they're, like, braiding their hair, and it's, like, way too touchy-feely human for Bakuun. Bakuun's like, that is creepy. Why are you treating your dog like a human being? And it's very just enforcing how much the slavery is not, it's not an intellectual thing. This is like a cultural, deep thing about how they approach Damani.
Yes.
And this is, the Damani's name is Gilly. She's killed in the next chapter.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Aw.
R.I.P. Gilly.
Yep. I also really like the name of his wolfhound, Nip.
Nip. That's a good name for a dog.
Mm.
We've had Pip for a horse,
yeah.
and I like Nip for the wolfhound. But also, like, a dog Nips.
Yes. That was what I was seeing, too. But like a wolfhound. Like a giant, fluffy dog, but like these delicate little, like, bites that he gives you.
Oh, cool. Cute. Yeah. When they're shepherding.
Mm-hmm.
Gotcha. He's soft bite, soft chews. I like this about Bakuun down a little bit further in the paragraph where he talks about Bakuun swallowed a curse, basically because the flyers were showing off. And I love that, like, what that tells us like, about his personality and his sense of duty and everything. He is not about the flash and the show. He is about coming in, getting work done. And I really like his point of view in here.
There's a lot of like nuance there between the flyers who are clearly, they're like race car drivers, right? They're clearly going to be flashy. That's what they do. And they're these valuable resources, which let them kind of get away with breaking a lot of the social conventions because they are rare and skilled and doing a very dangerous job.
They're test pilots. You're going to tell a test pilot what to do? No, you aren't.
No. So yeah, there's this value to them that lets them sort of break out of the society a little bit, and I really like that.
Yeah, a little individualist expression.
Yeah, and just I think that's what gives us a lot of the cultural building. Is he does so much cultural building for the Seanchan in this POV,
which is why the Outriggers would have been such a cool idea, because it would have been almost like a whole different fantasy series set in a whole different world.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I love the visual too of how the flyer like swings underneath the rockin'. Like, I guess it's when I picked the message back up, but just the hot dogging thing. It's like, I mean, it's the most efficient way to do it. It just happens to look really cool. I don't know what you're complaining about. Like,
no, and they put it up on a tall pole so they can fly by without actually landing the rockin', because we've seen rockins are super awkward on land, and they like have trouble taking back off again. So if they can just stay in the air, that makes them much more effective as a scouting force.
Well, and also I think it shows also one of the, and again, you guys have been doing battle more than I did, but to me it shows one of the limitations of Rand, even with the power. He's got these, you know, we talked about earlier, these Ashaman sewing through the ground, but they're still on the ground. Bakuun's got flyers and he's got the drones. He's seeing the image of them doing that without them even knowing that he's watching them.
And Sanderson comes up with a great solution to that, which is the horizontal gateways in the air, really up high, so you can see the whole battlefield in real time. And that's essentially like having satellites, you know, like that you can look down and see the thing. So there's a, it's interesting how ineffective they're like, oh, we can use gateways. That's how we're going to scout, when it's like, yeah, there are better ways to do that.
Yeah, but you get to see a lot of the evolution of warfare very quickly in the way that he introduces these elements. He's just like, 300 years of military engineering, just pack it into a couple of weeks.
And that reminds me a lot of the Clan of the Cave Bear. I don't know if you've read the series.
Oh, yeah. I just reread that a few months ago. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it has some issues and a lot, especially around how it depicts Neanderthals, because it's not historically accurate in any way, shape, or form.
They were written in the 80s. It's okay.
I thought it was the 70s. So even that's even,
You might be right. Anyway, the science is a lot older than we know now.
Yes. Yes.
But then but what he does show is probably 100,000 years of tool evolution and use in one person. Like that, his main character keeps inventing these new tools that we know from history literally took maybe not 100,000 years, but like 10,000 years for humans to invent all of these various tools. And like, because they'd invent one of those tools and it would change society for multiple thousands of years, you know? And he shows it all happening in like one person's lifetime.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, part of what I love about that series is that the author did a lot of the skills herself. And so like there's just these mind-numbing details of exactly how you do it because she literally did it. But yeah, I really like that part of those books.
And then later on the books kind of become Harlequin romances, which I'm not a huge fan of.
Yes, which I lost.
I still haven't finished the last book because every time I pick it up, I'm like, God, this soap opera goes nowhere. But I love all the plants. I love all of the technology. I love her imagining of the clothes and the houses. Like, kind of the Earth's Children series is, the number of sex scenes after book one. It's just, that's what the
it's
first
too much.
book, it's like Wheel of Time. Like the first book is so different from the rest. Like just read the first book. And then maybe if you really want to read a bunch of like, prehistoric Ice Age botany, then read Plains of Passage, because it's basically sex scenes and botanical descriptions. That's like basically what happens with Plains of Passage, which is really beautiful because they literally walk across Eurasia. No, they walk across the European part of Eurasia. They start like in Central Europe and walk all the way to France. So like, it's a beautiful book if you just
yes, and then they have more hot sex. Okay, moving on. Let's go. But yeah, the first book's really cool because it shows how all that technology kind of peaked, right? It's supposed to be the end of the Neanderthals' development of tools. God damn it, we are gonna finish this chapter.
Okay. Well, the next part is like so good in my opinion. I love when he discovers they have Aes Sedai, and he walks here and he talks about how that he just could not believe anyone would let those women run free. And then we have Tyr's face showed that he remembered the tales about an Aes Sedai weapon. So like this person like actually remembers those tales. Like we're getting that world building, but also the understanding of what a generation means to the Seanchan. Like they have a much longer memory, a much longer generation, a much longer culture.
I think you're misinterpreting that.
You think so?
The weapon that he's talking about is the exploding gateway that Elaine did.
Oh my God, you're right.
There's a whole series of comments where the Seanchan hesitate to continue to expand because they are terrified that this weapon can be used against them at will, when the reality is it was entirely a mistake by Elaine that flattened a town.
I think, that makes so much more sense.
I mean, you are right. I think that they have very long memories.
You are right,
what
yes.
Aes Sedai used to be, and that's why they don't even like the word Aes Sedai. But yes, in this case, it is the time Elaine pulled a Taviran with chaos.
Well, hey, I got us back in the chapter at least. I was wrong, but I got us back in the chapter.
Yeah.
I also like the line he says about how he'd looking at the coast, and he'd seen the coast to the east, and he wanted his burial prayers paid for before he tried a landing there. Again, it gives you a sense of his personality. He's pragmatic, he's brave, and also he's not an idiot.
Right.
Also gives you a sense of why no one's attacking from the coast.
Right, this is supporting, remember the wave lecture. Yeah, this military guy is agreeing with me. Those waves are brutal.
Yes, exactly.
They are like, oh, well, we've got our own magic. Well, they've got their magic. And it's like, who's going to duke it out? Because now we both have machine guns. Ooh.
Right. And to your credit, Aradia, geology still trumps everything because no one can get past the waves because of the geological formations in the under the water.
Oh yeah, nature will always have the last word.
Always.
So the flyers are reporting that obviously this force just appeared 10 miles away, right? Like, and he's like, how the hell did that happen? And we know gateways, right? Like, but they are unaware of gateways as a thing,
right? Which
is also why they are unaware of the weapon. Right, that
right, yeah, they've never heard of unraveling gateway weaves. That's not a thing.
Well, and also that the destruction, the people who saw the gateway were destroyed.
Mm-hmm. I also bet that that Seanchan do not ever practice unweaving weaves of any sort. I would bet you that the way that the Damani Suldam relationship is that's not a skill that they could ever practice. Like the Aiel practice it because they can. The Aes Sedai choose not to. I think the Suldam couldn't.
Right. I think it's definitely it's not even considered. Like it's not even something that they could even comprehend that you would. Why would you ever unravel something? There's
also a lot of problems with the forced circle. Like, because essentially the only channeling Seanchan do is in a circle, and so I feel like there are hard limits on what you can do in a circle, and that's the only channeling that happens with Seanchan.
Wow. Which, again, if you take a minute, Seth, and really just think about that, like, what are the ramifications of that? We talk about, ramifications of the culture around power for the Aiel versus the Aes Sedai but what is the culture around, the traditions and the limitations, as you said, around channeling in Seanchan, because everything is done in a circle. That's a fascinating repercussion.
That's going to constrain so much of their ability to innovate, on top of the fact that as a culture, with the hierarchy that they do and the relationship to channeling that they do, they're not going to encourage innovation culturally. And then the power mechanics are going to be like, yeah, well, you couldn't anyway. So
right. Ooh, self-fulfilling prophecy.
And then there's the whole, like, it's hard to innovate when obviously Damani aren't going to innovate because they're slaves, and the Suldam aren't going to innovate because they're not quote unquote channeling.
Right. So no one realizes they're actually in power.
And that's why basically, the Suldam have lost almost all skills other than making Adam and being weapons. That's it. That's all they've got.
And making skylights, which is basically just a weapon pointed at the sky.
Right. As fireworks are basically weapons pointed at the sky. Yeah.
Exactly. Well, first they were art and then they became weapons, but yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. I hadn't thought about that, Seth.
So that's one of the things is there's not a lot of skill in the Suldam other than some very basic things. Finding metals, maybe, but yeah.
But they do have the skill of making a Terangrial, which I have completely lost how to make all Terangrial. So, like, when Elaine reverse engineers the one, like, that opens up a whole bunch of new stuff for her. So, they get that one thing. But yeah, it's very limiting. All they have, they are a hammer, and everything looks like a nail.
Mm-hmm. Well, and going back to the chapter with that comment, Aradia, Bakuun even says, like right here toward the end, he talks about the Damani, he could cut anyone to pieces before they managed to try attacking across the muddy meadow. Like they're so confident in the Damani because they've had no reason to not be confident in the Damani. And, everything looks like a nail if all you have is a hammer, and they've got a very good hammer that they have worked with and improved for generations.
Yeah. Yeah, he's very confident in his command of this geography. Yes. He knows where people are. No, they just showed up, but I still know what I'm doing. And his military hubris is pretty strong, like, despite being a generally pragmatic guy.
And here's an interesting comment about the timing of the return, right?
Yes.
He had missed the last battle of the consolidation by 200 years, right? So the Seanchan have been consolidating their entire continent ever since they got there until 200 years ago. And then it's been 2 generations, and already you said you think that's full lifetime generations. That would be about 160 years. So it's about 40 years after the consolidation where they're like, okay, what are we going to do now? Oh, it's time to start the return.
We've run out of battlefields. Let's go home. We can fight there. I never thought about that.
Yeah.
Oh my God, they are insects. They are like ants. So it's like their whole mission is one step. Okay, we're consolidated. Now we go this. I mean, they are totally hive minded, and they're accomplishing what they're doing because they switch immediately from we conquered everything we can, turn around, and now we go back because it's just hive mind.
I never thought about that timeline. That they spend centuries putting the continent together, and in less than half a century, they are so bored that they start a multi-generation colony ship imperial expansion project. Like, that is damn, they are insatiable. They're fucking insatiable.
Yes. Yeah. Talk about type A personalities. That was great, Seth. I never thought about that whole generation thing and how they literally just pivoted. It's the next thing to do.
Yeah.
Just right away. That is wildly fast.
Oh, but it goes back to Seth's Crystal Throne. When you can compel people and you why not? Hey, we're done consolidating. Bam, let's start doing something new.
Right, probably some young emperor gets up there and is like, I'm going to Alexander the Great out of this shit. Oh, there's no continent left? Fine, we're going over the ocean.
Exactly.
Well, and also, if you think about having a culture that is dependent on conquering and expanding to feed itself, what do you do when you've conquered your continent? You move on to the next continent. There's a certain culture that exists and has to perpetuate itself through continual conquest. And actually, Super Skylake makes a really good point. Because the Damani don't learn very well, the best way to learn is to capture somebody who has that knowledge.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Yes, that's great. Oh.
So the expansion not only increases land and power, but it also is probably the best way to increase the knowledge and skill of your Damani.
Yeah.
That's amazing. So now, of course, the Damani have gateways and they have all this other knowledge that Aes Sedai or AIL have. How is that going? I mean, you talked about Clan of the Cave Bear and the Neanderthals and the development of tools that took 10,000 of years. Seth's talking about, imagine having all those tools now at the Damani because they're not going away. They're still keeping the Damani, and how that's going to affect Seanchan, life.
It's going to be hard to get rid of them.
Yeah. I honestly, I know we're supposed to feel optimistic after Nakomi and everything, but I just feel like the Seanchan are just, I don't know that you can ever fully beat the Seanchan.
So I think you can, because Seanchan can't create bigger circles, and they don't have male channelers. And I think those are 2 crippling problems that they cannot overcome.
They don't have male channelers yet, but now that the taint is gone, what's that going to do to all the male channelers? They still going to just kill them?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
They can't control them.
Right.
The way they do the female channelers.
Unless they engineer male Adam, because the necessity drives them to figuring it out.
What happens with the SAD bracelets? Do those ever get duplicated?
Yeah, that's, I think.
I always thought the SAD bracelets were just a male Adam. I just thought they automatically assumed, oh, you need two to control a male or something for whatever reason.
They do.
Or the fourth circle, something with the, don't you have to have like a man and two women or whatever? And
A woman can wear both bracelets.
And I wonder if part of that, too, is because men could never be trusted to be on the leading side because of the taint. And I wonder if in a non-tainted world, if they could make an ADOM where men could be Suldom and control male channelers just the way the women do.
What if through some bass-ackwards way, the Seanchan actually wind up creating the Age of Legends and this utopia of peace simply because they just have so much control, so much administration, and so much like power. They actually evolve from once they've conquered everything to creating utopia.
I'm hearing a real like, but what if we conquered the world right this time? Like, I feel like that's what the Seanchan are like. But if he had everyone, in the system.
Okay, don't cancel me. I didn't mean that.
It's a grand old way of thinking. It's
right,
a
right.
way of thinking. Like
it's very much a Seanchan way of thinking.
Oh, but no, it's Super Skylick's right in chat. Women have to lead circles. Two men can't be in a circle together. That's a built mechanic in the thing.
I thought there was something like that.
Not necessarily. Well, up to a point. You need more than 13 women to have two men in a circle together.
Right. You can't have two men alone making like the Suldom
Right.
Damani relationship.
Yes. And there's all sorts of rules based on, like, if you have one man and one woman, like, either one can, I think the man has to lead in that situation.
Yeah, I think that's why I thought there were two bracelets, because I thought if a man and woman are in a circle, the man has to lead, I believe. But if you have a man and two women,
yes,
then the women can lead. So then the fourth circle, if we're using that same dynamic of physics or whatever, the man is not leading. So therefore, you have to have two women. So one of the women has to be the one leading. That's kind of how I just always looked at it.
Yeah. Yeah, there's some very, if you look into circles, it's on the wiki, there is a lot of weird rules about who can lead when, depending on how many people, and there's and what exactly constitutes a full circle, because I think we decided that was 5 men and 67 women.
It adds up to 72. I know it adds up to 72.
It adds up to 72, and I think the max is 5 men.
Wow.
And the rest have to be women. It might be 6 men or something like that, but my numbers. But yeah, there's a max number of people in that full circle that Demandred is leading.
Oh, right. I was like, when does this ever come up in the book?
Yeah.
But you're right, when Demandred and the Sharans are.
Oh, Super Psylike is pointing out that it might be 35 men and 37 women in a full circle. I've looked this up so many times, and I always forget it like 5 minutes after I've looked it up.
It's weird mechanics that basically never happen. It's like one evening he got really into building it and made the rules, but never actually needed to apply them very much. He just made it up.
Oh, yes, I think so too. One late night.
It's like, it's cool. Yeah, sometimes you just get hyper focus and you drink caffeine too late in the day, and it's just what it is.
Or you have some natural, Two Rivers Tabak, and you're just like, oh man, I can see around corners.
Absolutely.
Here's how circles work. So then also here we're talking about the consolidation and everything. And he talked about how the rebellions had not, like, so even after the consolidation, they still had rebellion because he spent 2 years fighting in one that claimed 30,000 dead and 50 times that shit. I mean, that's a huge number of people.
What is 50 times 30,000? 50 times 30,000? That's a lot. That's like 1.5 million people shipped back to the mainland for as property. That is a hell of a campaign.
So I'm seeing the minimum number of men is 5, not the maximum. I got that backwards. So it's basically you have 13 and 1, right? But to get more females, you need another male channeler. Then you can add 13 more females. Then to get more women, you need another male, and then you only get 8 more females, and then and then 8 and 1, 8 and 1, 8 and 1 until you reach 72.
Wow. Okay.
So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 men is the minimum you can have in a full circle.
That thanks for doing the math.
And then the maximum number of men is balanced would be 35 men and 37 women. So that's the most powerful full circle you can have.
And even then the women have majority.
With 3 exceptions, there must always be a greater number of women in the circle than there are men. These exceptions are a circle of 1 man and 1 woman, 2 men and 1 woman, or 2 men and 2 women.
Interesting. Wonder why he stopped there.
Okay, I also just checked my math. I was right. 1.5 million people shipped out as property from one of those rebellions that this guy served in. So, yeah, that's not a small rebellion.
Wow.
I'd say that's a fair assessment scientifically.
Mm-mm.
Yeah, and that was in his lifetime. So again,
yeah, that's what he did personally.
Right. So and he was born after the consolidations. These are rebellions that are just constantly going on. So they're still having rebellions, but they're still moving forward with the return. Yeah. Like, again, it goes back to the whole pivot thing. Like, what are we going to do? Like, the rebellions become minor skirmishes, which even though it's a major rebellion, because we're focused on the next task, which is returning. We're going back.
Yeah.
And again, Super Skylake is pointing out that one of the reasons ADOM aren't being used, the male ADOM aren't used, is because it will taint the women.
Right, because they're actually interacting.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Which, again, that won't be relevant in the 4th age. The dynamics of how the sad bracelets interact is just the ingredients are different now.
Wow. That's kind of scary. Thank you, Aradia. I am totally, after reading this chapter and having this discussion, I think the Outrigger novels would have been incredibly interesting, but I'm afraid they would have been way too depressing.
Yeah. You're going to need to take the Seanchan down by a couple of power levels and take away some of their toys in order to have that not be an incredibly grimdark sort of series.
Very.
Bakuun thankfully put Rakan and Flyers out of his mind as he surveyed the valley. Broad and long, nearly flat except for this hill, and surrounded by steep wooded slopes. Only a goat could enter except by the passes in his sight. With the Damani, he could cut anyone to pieces before they managed to try attacking across that muddy meadow. He had passed the word along, though. If the enemy came straight on, they would arrive before any possible reinforcements by 3 days at best. How had they come this far unseen? He had missed the last battles of the consolidation by 200 years, but some of those rebellions had not been small. 2 years fighting on Marendalar, 30,000 dead, and 50 times that shipped back to the mainland as property. Taking notice of the strange kept the soldier alive. Ordering the camp struck and all signs of it cleared, he began moving his command to the forested slopes. Dark clouds were massing in the east. Another of those cursed storms coming.
This is just it's beautiful, really beautiful to see.
And the next chapter is the Fog of War.
Yeah, that's a big old battle scene.
Literally.
For now, thank you so much, Egwene Fanboy Chad, for joining us. This was a really, really fun recording. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, we had a blast.
Oh, I'm so glad to hear that. Thank you guys so much for having me, and I hope I get to come back sometime. You guys are great.
Definitely.
You made my day, and just best of luck to you all. And I'm drinking Bold City Brewing, Duke's Brown Ale. Bold City Brewery is a local brewery in Jacksonville, Florida. So I just want to put that out there. They're one of my old-time brewery fans. And their brown ale is amazing. So,
ooh, good brown ale.
Nice.
I'm overwhelmed by IPAs. It's almost hard to find something that's not an IPA up in the Pacific Northwest.
Dude, it's the same here in Charlotte. I think it's a millennial thing because Charlotte's very heavy millennial. I actually didn't like IPAs until I came to Charlotte, and there's just so many here now. But and this also, This is like $5 a can.
Ooh.
So it's very inexpensive.
Yeah, that's a microbrew. It's about right, but oof, yeah, that sounds nice. Yeah, I've been much more of a wine person lately, just because I really like drinking, and beer is it's a liquid meal, you know? So I've been getting more into wine, but...
What wine do you like to drink?
I'm very indiscriminate. I am cheap when it comes to wine. I prefer white wines in general, but I'm also happy with reds. Currently, my favorite is like a cheap blend. It's literally my favorite of what we've been drinking. It's a blend. And it's like, I'm really cheap. I don't care.
Naomi has a really good red blend that's pretty cheap. It's amazing. And then there's this one called New Age. It's a white wine blend from Argentina, and it's just heaven. It's so good.
Nice. Yeah, our favorite brand it's called Rex Goliath.
Oh, yes. I know Rex Goliath.
Yeah, the giant chicken, the giant 47-pound rooster. He's got like medals and military gear. He's great. Love Rex Goliath. But it's the big bottles. There's like 2 bottles of wine in one, because we're environmentalists. We want to reduce our packaging.
Absolutely. Yeah,
so.
It's for a good cause.
It's why I like boxed wine, actually. Well, I will say glass is better for wine bottles for recycling, but at the same time, like, you can get a box wine, and that's like a lot of wine in a box. And the box is recyclable. I don't know about the plastic bag, though.
The plastic bag. And see, we're hanging on to the bottles because a long time ago, we knew someone who built a sauna with like 2 of the walls in the sauna were cement with bottles in it. It was a bottle wall. It is so cool. So it's like when we decided to switch to being wine drinkers, it's like, if we just start saving the bottles right now, right at the beginning, then when it comes time for us to build a sauna, which we'll definitely do, or something similar, we will have enough bottles to really do this. So currently we are warehousing all of our wine bottles.
That's impressive. You should put a picture on Discord. I'd love to see where you are now.
Someday when it's not an absolute hoarder mess.
So never. No.
You haven't been to my place. You have not seen the chaos that's here. Yes, he has.
Honestly, your house is actually very neat. If anything, it's a little empty. You've got lots of space.
Yes, we still have an apartment's worth of stuff spread out into a
house.
Also, we have a garage where all the true chaos has been.
Yeah.
Stuff.
You didn't let me in there.
Have to. No.
I'm surprised you've been able to make that happen. Most people, when they buy a house, man, they automatically just start filling it up without even realizing it. So you've been in your house like 2 years now, I think, right?
A little over a year.
Oh, it's only been a year.
It's only been a year. I know it's been a long time. I've been talking about it, but yeah, it's a lot of work to like get things. We live like 40 minutes from the nearest town, so it's just so much work. I am in the middle of kicking myself into getting a piano, which will take up a lot of space.
Do you play?
Informally. It's my family piano that I've had forever and ever, and it's at a family friend home just the valley over, and I need to get it brought over to my house now that I own a house. And I just need to like call someone, but I'm a millennial, so I don't like calling people. It's a thing. It's a problem that I have.
Can't you just text them? That's
no, piano movers, they don't need to use millennial forms of communication. They can just be old school.
Yeah, and they usually are old school.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Piano movers and then a tuner, because it will be absolutely knocked all out of whack being driven over here. But then I will have my childhood piano, and my husband and I both very much enjoy just sort of therapeutically hitting the piano in pleasing patterns. We don't really play, but we play with the piano. It's a toy.
Okay, I understand that. I did one of my first recital songs was the Young and the Restless. The dun 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 dun, and so like that's the only thing I can remember how to play. So every time I go to piano, it's just kind of like knock it out, and everyone's like, "Oh wow, you can play Young and the Restless." Yeah, but that's all I can play.
I can do one thing.
Exactly.
And then second follow-up question: how'd you find the podcast?
So my brother, actually, so when I started reading the books back then, I immediately got my brother and then our other best friend involved, and the four of us would, we'd go to Barnes & Noble or whatever and just sit and read or whatever. And so we've kind of stayed in touch with it a little bit. My brother, in advance or right around the TV show, sent me the podcast. He actually sent me the first episode you guys did on Age of Legends, and he was like, yo, check this out. This is the most amazing, like, just in-depth speculation into Age of Legends I've ever seen. And so we listened together, talked about it, and then realized that there was more. It was every chapter. And so, and also it was so mellow. Just, it was like me and my brother back in the day, drinking beers and talking about Wheel of Time when we were, or when we'd have our friend or whatever. And it just felt like that same thing, with you and Patrick just talking over beers. And it was very cathartic. It really helped a lot with, transitioning into 2022 and everything. So I found the podcast that way, binged it, and just have enjoyed it, got on the Discord, heard about Spoilers Con, and then just have kind of watched you guys grow, like I said, I caught up in about 2 months, which
that's insane to me. You must have been listening 24/7 to listen to all that content. Because I think at this point there's more hours of podcast than there is like for the audiobooks. If you sat down and listened to all the audiobooks.
I think there probably is. I think
I did the math.
Yeah. It was a lot of reading. I mean, a lot of listening, but it was great. It was just what I needed. I was having to make a lot of trips back and forth to Florida during February.
Gotcha.
And so it was, nice to have on the road and, and also, dealing with insomnia. It's a great way to deal with insomnia, to put the podcast on and just kind of let it roll.
I've had a lot of people tell me that my voice puts them right to sleep. So
I didn't mean it that way. It's enjoyable and you can kind of like just let it play in the background. So.
Oh, wow. It must have been wild to hear 4 years in 2 months, just that whole like time capsule. Yeah. Like that's like doing an ice core, right? And be like, this is what the ice age, like snowfall patterns for millions of years look like. Like you just like slammed through 4 years of Seth's history.
I love that analogy. I took one geology class, so every once in a while, I really get your connections there, Radius. So I love them. But that's exactly what it was like. It was like just doing like a slice and watching the evolution of this one thing happen in just a very short amount of time. And I'm so excited to actually be on here with you guys. So thank you.
Absolutely.
Well, we're glad to have you. This is going to be fun, even if it's a very dreary chapter. We're going to have fun.
Well, it literally starts off with drizzle. So can you get more dreary than that?
No.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening to the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast. Rate us in the Apple Podcast app or support us on Patreon. Is that good enough?